Hello everyone, I know you are going to use this video for falling asleep, so before that, like this video, subscribe to the channel and let me know where you are from, also what time is it. It began with the smell. Not the sharp sting of rot, not even the damp stench of mold crawling up cracked basement walls. This was something else. Something far worse. It was a scent you didn't know until you knew it, and once you did, it never left you. Thick, wet, coppery. It crept into the back of your throat and settled. Like the aftertaste of something you were never meant to swallow. The kind of smell that clung to your skin, your clothes, your memory. And for Gabriel Morrow, it would mark the start of everything. He didn't tell anyone at first. Not when the smell first woke him up at 3:14 a.m., a number he'd come to fear. Not when the corners of his room began to feel off, like something had shifted by a fraction of an inch. Just enough to be wrong, but not enough to prove. It wasn't until the third night that he noticed the sounds. They were low, wet, muffled, like someone trying to speak through a mouth full of soil. It came from the floorboards, underneath his bed, not the usual creaks of an old house adjusting to the cold, but deliberate, rhythmic, like breathing, like something waiting. That was when he finally mentioned it to Elise. His sister was younger by 2 years, and sharper than she let on. She wore sarcasm like armor, always had, but behind that was someone who saw more than she said. The moment he told her, she didn't laugh. She didn't mock. She simply said, "Did it start after the box came?" The box. It had arrived 4 days ago. No return address, no stamps. Just a battered cardboard shell, sealed in black wax and left at their doorstep as though placed by hand. They hadn't ordered anything. Their parents hadn't been home. Curiosity had taken over, and Gabriel opened it. Inside was only one thing, a mirror, oval, old, rimmed in tarnished silver, and no bigger than a dinner plate. The glass had an odd shimmer, like oil on water. For some reason, it felt warm to the touch. They'd brought it inside, put it on the hallway wall opposite the staircase. It seemed harmless. It wasn't. By the time they realized that, it was already too late. Elise told him about her own strange nights. The scratching at her window, even though they lived on the second floor. The whispers, not in her ears, but behind her eyes, low and slow, murmuring her name with a voice that slithered through her mind like fog. She hadn't wanted to worry him. But now, with his story, she couldn't deny what she had been fearing. Something had followed the mirror. And it wasn't alone. They decided to test it. Together, they stood in front of the mirror that afternoon. The surface looked normal in the daylight, mostly. But as Gabriel leaned in, just a little too close, he saw it. Not his own reflection. Not exactly. It was him. But older, thinner, pale with dark circles under sunken eyes, and something was wrong with his mouth. It hung slightly open, like it was about to whisper or scream. When he blinked, the reflection didn't. Its eyes stayed wide, watching. They stepped back. The moment broke. The mirror returned to normal, and then Elise bled. It was just her hand, just a small slice across her palm, like a paper cut, but they both knew she hadn't touched anything. She hadn't moved. One moment she was fine. The next, blood was dripping down her wrist. Gabriel didn't say anything. He took her hand, wrapped it in a towel, and they both agreed the mirror had to go. But when they tried to move it, it wouldn't budge. Not like it was bolted to the wall, because it wasn't. Gabriel checked. No nails, no glue, no brackets. Just stuck. Like the mirror had decided it belonged there, and that was final. They considered breaking it, but Elise hesitated. What if that's what it wants? She asked. What if that does something? They left it alone. That night, things got worse. Gabriel dreamed of dirt, endless, choking dirt pouring into his mouth and nose, forcing its way into his lungs while his limbs refused to move. In the distance, something shifted through the soil, long limbs dragging, blind eyes shining from a face stitched shut. When he woke up, his mouth was full of mud, Elise was already downstairs. She hadn't slept. Her eyes were red. She was trembling. She held up her phone without a word and played the video. Gabriel's room. 3:14 a.m. The video was shaky but clear. The door to his room slowly creaked open, on its own. A figure, too tall and too thin, slipped through the crack. Its face was obscured by shadow, but its movements were sharp and sudden, like something twitching between frames. It stood at the foot of his bed and just watched. For 11 minutes. Then it bent down, slowly, and reached under the bed. The screen went black. That was when the lights flickered. Not just in the living room, all over the house. And then the silence came. Thick, pressed against their eardrums. No hum from the fridge, no ticking clock, no distant birds, just nothing. And from the top of the stairs, a sound. Thump, thump, thump. Slow, dragging footsteps, coming down. They backed away. The lights came on for a second. Just one. Long enough to see what stood at the top of the stairs. It was Gabriel. But it wasn't. Same face, same eyes, but hollow. Like a puppet made from his skin. Its mouth was stitched with black thread, the corners bulging with something squirming beneath. And in its hand it held a bone, long and thin, splintered at one end. Gabriel couldn't breathe. The lights went out again. When they came back, the thing was gone. They ran, left the house without shoes, without phones, without keys. They didn't stop until they reached the old church at the edge of town, the one that had been closed since Father Henley died in 1998. Found hanging from the steeple with a mirror tied to his chest. They never spoke of that. No one in town ever did. But it was the only place Gabriel could think of, a place without mirrors, without reflections. Just dust, cracked wood, and silence. Elise lit a candle from the altar. Its light flickered oddly, casting too many shadows on the wall. Gabriel closed his eyes. That was when he saw it. Not with his eyes, but in his mind. A house, but not their house. An older one, Victorian, covered in vines. Its windows shattered. A well out back, deep and choked with weeds. A feeling of hunger radiated from it, not like a person's. More like the earth itself had opened and begun to starve. And behind that house stood a tree, dead, blackened, and hanging from it a child, mouth sewn shut, eyes open, watching him. He gasped and stumbled back. Elise caught him, shaking him. "You saw it, didn't you?" she asked. "The house," he nodded. She had seen it too. The dreams. The same visions. Every night since the mirror came. And now they knew. It wasn't a dream. It was real. Somewhere out there, that house existed. And whatever was inside that mirror, it came from there. Gabriel looked around the church. Old, yes, but it held something else. A presence. Not holy. Not evil. Just waiting. Elise pointed to the wall behind the altar. Painted on the stone, almost faded with time, was a symbol. A circle with an eye in the center weeping. Beneath it, a phrase in Old Latin. Speculum tenebris pandit ostium. They didn't know what it meant. Not yet. But the word speculum caught his attention. Mirror. Gabriel whispered, "The mirror opens the door." Elise nodded slowly. A door to where? Before he could answer, the candle flickered again. But this time it didn't stop. It blew out. Darkness swallowed the church. And from the far end, near the old confession booths, something moved. Not fast, but steady, the sound of feet, bare, slapping against stone, and then a whisper. Not in English, not in Latin, in a voice they both recognized. Their mother, except she'd been dead for 7 years. Elise clutched his arm, her nails digging into his skin. Gabriel took a breath. "Don't listen," he said. "It's not her." But even as he said it, he felt it pull at him. The voice, like warm water, wrapping around his memories. He remembered the night she died. The snow, the scream, the way the window shattered without cause. And now, here she was, calling, from the dark. They had opened something, and it was only just beginning. The shadows beneath their bed were no longer content to stay hidden. They were coming up for air, and they remembered every name. Gabriel, Elise. "You." 3:14 a.m. "Don't look under the bed." Don't look in the mirror. And whatever you do, don't answer when she whispers your name. The dark inside the church wasn't natural. It was thick, like it had weight, texture. Gabriel could feel it pressing against his chest, slipping between his fingers, coating his skin in a cold sweat that didn't belong to fear alone. Elise was close, her grip on his arm trembling with tension, but neither of them moved. Not at first. The voice had rooted them to the spot. Gabriel. It came again, softer now, curling around the old pews like smoke. He wanted to say it wasn't real, that it couldn't be their mother. But deep down, something inside him stirred. A small, aching piece of him that still remembered the sound of her bedtime lullabies. The way she used to hum off key when she cooked, the warm rasp in her voice when she used to whisper, "I love you," at the edge of sleep. The voice in the dark had that same tone, that same rhythm. Elise, baby, come here, love. It's okay now. Alyssa's face was pale. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Gabriel knew what she was thinking, because he was thinking the same thing. What if, just what if, it really was her? What if the thing in the mirror had brought something back? Something lost. They'd both seen her die, but no one ever found the body. Just the blood, the shattered glass, the empty room. The strange symbol etched into the frost on her bedroom window. Gabriel reached into his pocket for his phone, but it was dead. Of course it was. They hadn't charged it in their panic. Or maybe something else had drained it. He didn't ask Elise to check hers. The moment didn't allow for questions, only decisions. The sound came again, this time from the far left confessional. Closer. Please, I'm so cold. I didn't mean to go. I was taken. I want to come home. Gabriel took a step forward before he realized he was moving. His body acting on its own, drawn by that voice that shouldn't exist. Elise snapped out of her daze and grabbed his sleeve, yanking him back. No, she said, voice low but sharp. That's not her. You know it's not. He nodded slowly, but his legs still wanted to move. The voice tugged at him like a thread stitched through his ribs. He forced himself to look away, to ground himself in the world he still knew. The candle stub on the altar, the flaking paint, the symbol with the weeping eye. Elise, he whispered, that symbol, I think it's part of a seal. Like a barrier. She looked at him, confused, but didn't argue. Do you think it's keeping something out, or keeping something in? Before she could respond, a sound echoed through the church. Fingernails dragging across wood. It came from inside the confessional. Slow, long, deliberate. The door creaked open. Nothing came out, but the smell did. It was the same one Gabriel had smelled that first night. Thick, wet, metallic. It filled the church in seconds, crawling up their nostrils, coating their tongues. Elise gagged. Gabriel pulled his shirt over his mouth, eyes locked on the confessional. And then something did come out. Not a person, not a thing. A shadow, flat and wrong. Like it had peeled itself from someone's feet and crawled off on its own. It slithered across the stone floor with an oily shimmer, moving against the grain of light, warping every shadow it touched. Elise stumbled back. It's coming toward the symbol. No, Gabriel said. It's avoiding it. The shadow curved around the altar, like a river diverted by a stone. It hissed when it came too close to the symbol, recoiling like it had been burned. That confirmed something Gabriel had hoped. The symbol was protective, maybe even holy, though this church had long since lost its sanctity. He stepped closer to it, pulling Elise with him. The shadow stopped. It hovered just outside the invisible line that seemed to pulse from the symbol. It didn't move, didn't speak, just watched. Why us? Elise whispered. Why now? Gabriel didn't answer. He didn't know. The next morning brought no relief. They returned home just after sunrise, expecting to find the house as they left it, silent and cold. But it wasn't. Every mirror in the house was gone. Not broken, not covered, just gone. The one in the hall, the bathroom, their mother's old vanity mirror in the attic. Even the tiny hand mirror Elise kept in her backpack. All missing. Except one. The oval mirror. The one that came in the box. It still hung on the wall where they'd left it, but now it had changed. The silver had darkened, like it had been left in fire. The glass had warped, bulging in the center, breathing. And the reflection it gave was no longer their own. It showed the house, but not theirs. The same house from the dreams. The Victorian one. The broken windows. The well. The blackened tree. And now in the mirror's image, there was a door. A heavy, rotted wooden door covered in nails and carvings. The carvings looked almost familiar, like the symbol in the church, but twisted, perverted. And the door was open. Just a crack. Gabriel leaned in, watching the door in the mirror. He squinted, trying to make out what lay beyond it, and then something looked back. A face. Childlike, but with hollow eyes. A grin too wide. Lips stitched shut with rusted wire. It blinked, and Gabriel fell back, heart pounding. Elise, it's watching us. She didn't respond. She was staring at the floor. There, in the grain of the wooden boards, new scratches had appeared. Long and curved, like claw marks. They hadn't been there when they left. Gabriel knelt, running his fingers across the grooves. Still fresh. Splinters rose like little knives. And in the silence of that moment, they both heard it. Knocking. Not at the door. From the mirror, 3 slow knocks. Gabriel approached it again, slower this time. He held his breath. Watched. Nothing. The mirror was just a mirror again. But then, across the glass, letters began to form. Like condensation on a cold window. WODSEWOU. The letters faded. Then more appeared. WREMEMBR. Then a third. UUOPENNTHE-DOR. Gabriel stepped back, fists clenched. We didn't mean to. The mirror didn't answer. But the smell came back. And from the corner of the room, the shadow returned. This time it had grown. It stood. And it had a face. Not a shadow anymore. Not entirely. It was the child from the mirror. Or what was left of it. Its skin sagged like wet paper. Its limbs were long and boneless. It moved with a lurching grace, twitching with every step. And stitched across its mouth, wire glinted in the light. Elise screamed. Gabriel moved in front of her, instinct kicking in, though he had no idea what to do. The thing raised one arm and pointed to the mirror. Then it spoke, not through its mouth, but through the room. Its voice echoed from the walls, the floor, the very air. She-S-A-O-A-I-N-G. And with that, it vanished. Not disappeared. Not vanished in a puff of smoke. It peeled away, like paint curling from fire. It stripped itself from the room and slid into the mirror. Gone. And the reflection returned to normal. Their faces stared back at them. But neither of them believed it. That night, they didn't sleep. They sat in the hallway, facing the mirror, watching for any flicker of movement. The house groaned around them. The wind outside howled. At one point, the lights buzzed and dimmed, and Elise swore she saw something crawl across the ceiling. But they didn't move, because they knew something was coming. Not a ghost, not a demon, not even a nightmare. This was older, hungrier, and it was only just starting. In the morning, Elise said one thing. We have to find the house, the one from the mirror. Gabriel didn't argue. They packed bags, supplies, salt, knives, flashlights. And the symbol from the church, hand drawn on pages torn from an old hymnal, copied as best they could. The mirror pulsed once when they walked by, as if aware of their plan, as if it knew where they were going. The door in the reflection now stood fully open, and beyond it, shadows danced, waiting. They didn't know where the house was, but it didn't feel like a mystery. It felt like a memory, just out of reach, like a word stuck on the tip of the tongue. Gabriel had seen glimpses of it in his dreams since the mirror arrived. Elise too. The twisted trees. The dry well. The hanging tree with its empty noose swinging, even when the air was still. The road to it wasn't drawn on any map, but they both knew they'd find it if they followed the right signs. And the signs had already started to appear. The first came as they left their street. A bird lying in the middle of the road. Not dead, wrong. Its wings were torn off, not by teeth or claws, but cleanly, as if clipped with scissors. It twitched, and its beak opened as they passed. A sound came out, something between a whimper and a gasp. Not natural. Human, like. They didn't stop. 30 minutes out of town, the trees changed. They were taller than they should have been, even for this part of the state. Twisted, gnarled, their bark blackened as if struck by lightning. But every one of them. The leaves didn't rustle. Not once. No birds. No insects. Just silence, the kind that felt wrong inside your bones. The air itself seemed thicker here. The road beneath the tires grew more cracked. Eventually, pavement gave way to gravel, then dirt, then roots. And then the car died. No sputter. No slow fade. Just silence. Gabriel turned the key again. Nothing. Not even the clicking sound of the starter. They both looked at each other, and neither said what they were thinking. It was waiting for them to walk. They left the car. As soon as they stepped into the forest, it felt like they had entered a different world. The daylight above was thin and pale, like it had to pass through something else before it reached them. The trees leaned closer together, almost as if they were whispering, watching. The deeper they walked, the more everything familiar dropped away. No cell signal. No distant hum of traffic. Even their own footsteps were muffled, like the forest floor swallowed sound. It didn't take long before they started seeing the symbols, etched into tree bark, painted onto stones. The same circle with the eye in the center, sometimes with the eye crying, sometimes with it closed. The weeping ones seemed safer. Those trees didn't feel as heavy, but the ones with closed eyes, those trees leaned forward, loomed. Gabriel swore one of them shifted when he looked away. After an hour, they found the well. Exactly like in the dreams, cracked stone ring, covered in dry moss, with the rusted remains of a rope pulley system hanging above it. Elise stepped toward it, but Gabriel pulled her back. The air around the well was cold, too cold. And there was something about the opening that seemed darker than it should be. Like it didn't just go down, but out. They didn't speak. They kept walking. That's when the forest started changing. It happened slowly, so slowly they might not have noticed it if not for Elise's photograph. She took a picture of a crooked tree with a hollow like a screaming mouth. She didn't know why. Instinct. But when she looked at the image, the tree was wrong, not just in shape, but in setting. The picture showed fog, the kind that clung to the ground like fingers. But where they stood, there was none. Gabriel checked the photo. In the picture, a figure stood behind the tree, tall, thin, smiling. But when they turned around, nothing was there. From that point on, the forest bent around them. The path twisted. Trees they'd passed already appeared again. Elise tied a piece of red fabric to a branch to mark their way. 10 minutes later, they passed it again, except it was soaked in something dark. Not water. It smelled like the mirror. They realized then they weren't walking in circles. The woods were folding. The trees moved when they blinked. The symbols pulsed faintly. Elise said she thought she heard someone whispering in the roots. Low voices, overlapping, speaking in a language neither of them knew, but somehow understood. Promises, warnings, lies. They kept walking. Eventually, they reached the field. An open space, completely round. No trees dared cross its edges. And in the center, the house. It looked exactly like it had in the mirror, old, 3 stories tall, covered in vines that pulsed as if alive. The windows were dark, some broken, others smeared with what looked like soot or blood. The front door hung slightly open. The porch sagged, and beside the house stood the tree, dead, twisted. Hanging from it was not a body, but a figure made of branches and cloth, shaped like a child. Its mouth was sewn shut with rusted wire. Just like the dream. Elise stepped into the clearing first. The air was thicker here. Every breath felt like swallowing water. Gabriel followed, each step heavier than the last. The moment they crossed the edge of the field, they felt it. The house saw them. not in a figurative way. They both felt its attention. The windows were its eyes, the front door its mouth, and it was smiling. They stood before it, the wind brushing their faces even though the trees around them were still. Gabriel reached for the doorknob. Elise grabbed his wrist. Wait. He looked at her, eyebrows raised. She reached into her bag and pulled out the copied symbol. The one from the church. She pressed it to the door, right above the knob. The wood hissed. The symbol burned, just for a moment. Enough to leave a blackened mark. Then everything went still. Gabriel turned the knob. The door creaked open. Inside, the house was frozen in decay. The wallpaper had peeled, revealing claw marks beneath. The wooden floor sagged with rot. The staircase wound up into shadows. The smell was worse here, stronger than ever. Not just blood, not just mold. It was death. But not just old death. Fresh. Somewhere deep in the house they heard a voice. Their mother's voice, crying, whispering, calling. Not from above, from below. From the basement. Gabriel turned to Elise. She nodded. They stepped inside, and the door closed behind them, by itself. The door shut with a sound that didn't echo. It thudded into place like a final nail, sealing them inside something old and hungry. Gabriel turned on his flashlight, and the beam barely pierced the gloom. It wasn't normal darkness. It was thick, clinging, like fog that refused to scatter. Elise held her breath, then clicked on her own light. Dust drifted through the air like ash, swirling in odd patterns that didn't follow their movement. It was as though the house exhaled each time they did. They stood in the entrance hall, facing a staircase that wound upward into shadows. On the left was a sitting room, its furniture sagging and stained. The walls scribbled with something dark, possibly ink, maybe something else. The paintings were turned backward, canvas against the wall, as if the subjects inside them no longer wanted to be seen. To the right was a hallway leading deeper into the house. And at the very end of it, barely visible in the pale glow of their lights, was the basement door. It was closed, thick, wooden, bolted with a rusted latch that looked far too new compared to the decay around it. Something about that door felt wrong. Not just menacing, personal, like it remembered them, or was waiting specifically for them to arrive. Elise moved first. She started down the hallway, her boots making soft impressions in the dust. Gabriel followed closely, scanning every corner, every shadow that shifted a beat too late after their lights passed. The walls were lined with old family photos, faces blurred, smeared, or scratched out. One frame was empty, its glass cracked and bleeding from the edges. Halfway down the hall, a whisper bloomed in Gabriel's ear. "Come see," he stopped. Turned around, no one. "Elise," he said quietly. "Did you hear?" She held up a hand. "I did." She hadn't turned around. She was staring at a small side table next to an old radiator. On it sat a music box, closed, but turning slowly, no key, no sound, just the motion. Round and round, its ballerina figure rising and falling like it was caught mid-dance in a dream it couldn't leave. Then it stopped, and the latch on the basement door snapped open. Neither of them moved. Something behind the door began to breathe. Slow, wet, like lungs filled with mud. A dragging sound followed, like something with too many limbs was shifting its weight closer to the door. Gabriel stepped forward, hands shaking. "We don't have to open it," he said. "We can look upstairs, or out back. Just not yet." Elise shook her head. "The dreams, it's always the basement. The child is always there. I know, but maybe that's where it wants us to go." Elise hesitated. Her fingers brushed the burnt mark she had drawn with the church's symbol earlier. "If it wanted to kill us, it already would have. It wants us to see something." She placed her hand on the doorknob. Gabriel raised his flashlight, pointing it directly at the door. "On 3. 1. Elise whispered. 2. She twisted the knob before he could say 3. The door creaked inward, slow and deliberate. The air that rolled out was damp, heavy with mildew and something metallic. Not fresh blood, old blood, rust, bone dust, Grief. The stairs were narrow, disappearing into pitch black. They stepped down, one creaking board at a time. The deeper they went, the colder it became. Gabriel's breath turned visible. Elise's flashlight flickered, just once, but long enough for Gabriel to see something at the bottom of the stairs. A figure, still, watching. Then the light came back. Nothing was there. They reached the bottom. The basement was wider than expected, too wide. It didn't match the house's layout. It spread far beyond the foundation. The walls were made of stone, slick with moisture. Chains hung from the ceiling, some empty, some holding scraps of old, rotted cloth. The floor was dirt, but not soft, packed, disturbed. There were handprints in the soil, small ones. Elise shuddered. In the center of the room stood a mirror, not the same one. This was taller than Gabriel. The frame was warped, like it had been bent under heat. The glass shimmered like the one back home, but darker. As if it didn't reflect light, it drank it. Gabriel stepped forward. That wasn't in the dream. Elise didn't respond. He turned back and realized she wasn't beside him anymore. Elise. He spun around. She stood frozen near the wall, staring at something. He moved closer, raising his light. There were words scratched into the stone. I gave them her face. Elise's voice was barely audible. What does it mean? Before Gabriel could respond, a soft creaking came from behind them. The mirror, it was turning, on its own, like it was trying to face them. Gabriel backed away. The glass shimmered, and then cleared. It showed the house. But not from the outside. From inside, from upstairs. A hallway, a bedroom door, slowly opening. Inside, a girl sat on the bed, pale, eyes wide, mouth sewn shut. Elise gasped, "That's me." Gabriel stared, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The girl in the mirror turned, looked directly at them, and began to rise. Not stand. Float. The scene inside the mirror tilted, as if gravity was changing. The room bent, warped. The girl smiled, though her mouth didn't open. The stitches stretched. Then she moved. Fast. Straight toward the mirror. Gabriel grabbed Elise and yanked her back as the glass cracked. A single hairline fracture across the surface, but no further. The girl was gone. The mirror now showed only their reflections. But something in Gabriel's chest knew she wasn't gone. Just closer. He turned to Elise, but she wasn't looking at him. She was staring at the floor. The handprints were moving. Slowly, dirt spilled outward. The ground trembled. And from beneath, something pushed upward. A finger, small, childlike, but gray and bloated. Then another. Then the top of a head. Gabriel stepped in front of her. "Get upstairs. Now." She didn't argue. They bolted up the stairs, the sounds behind them growing louder. Dirt tearing, bones snapping, breath rattling. Something old was climbing out. They slammed the basement door shut just as something hit it from the other side. Hard. Once. Twice. Then silence. They backed away. Gabriel pulled the bolt shut. "That mirror, it's connected to the other one. They're not just showing us things. They're pulling things through." Elise's eyes widened. "Do you think it's done?" He didn't answer. Because upstairs, a door creaked open. Not in the house. In the mirror. The sound was too deliberate to be ignored. Not wind. Not the moan of an old house shifting under its own weight. This was a door, heavy old, slowly opening above them, and they both knew where it came from. Not just from upstairs, but from a very specific place. From that room. The one that always stayed closed in the dreams. The one at the end of the hallway, third door on the left. The one with the mirror nailed to the inside of it, where the reflection never matched the person standing in front of it. Gabriel stared up the staircase that spiraled into thick shadows. His grip tightened around the flashlight, though he felt the weight of it more than its use. The light hadn't been reliable. Sometimes it flickered even when the batteries were new. Sometimes it dimmed for no reason. And once, only once, it had gone completely dark when something was standing 3 feet in front of him. "Elise," he said quietly, "we don't have to go up there. We can leave." We saw what's in the basement. We know this place isn't—" She cut him off with a look. "We came to find out what's behind this," she said. "We don't stop now. Not when we're this close." Her voice didn't shake, but her eyes did. That was all Gabriel needed to know. She was afraid too, but they were in this together. Always had been. Since the night their mother disappeared. Since the mirror arrived. Since the moment they realized the house in their dreams wasn't just a dream, but a place waiting to be remembered. They moved up the stairs slowly. The wood groaned beneath them, each step a warning. The banister had deep scratch marks in it. 3 long grooves like talons had dragged along its length. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling like curtains, swaying even though the air was still. At the top of the stairs, the hallway stretched out long and narrow. 4 doors, 3 on the left, 1 at the far end, all of them closed, except the 3rd one. That door stood open now, just a few inches. Gabriel felt it before he saw it. An H in his stomach, like something inside him recognized the place and wanted to turn back. His skin prickled with cold sweat. Elise walked ahead of him, her fingers brushing the wall as if to ground herself. The wallpaper here was different, older. The pattern looked like faces if you stared too long. Blank. Eyeless watching. They stopped in front of the open door. The smell was here too, but not like the basement. Up here, it was sweeter. Faint, almost floral. But underneath it was something else, something rotten, like something pretending to be pleasant. The room beyond was dim. Curtains drawn. Dust floated through the air in slow spirals. In the center of the room sat a child's bed, small, with peeling white paint and a torn canopy overhead. Stuffed animals lay face down on the floor, all missing their eyes. But the mirror was what caught Gabriel's attention. It was nailed to the wall above a tiny wooden dresser. Oval. Silver. The exact same shape as the one that arrived at their house. But this one wasn't reflective. It was black, like a window into a world with no light. Elise stepped into the room. The floorboards didn't creak under her feet. They shuddered. Gabriel stayed in the doorway, eyes darting between the walls. There were markings here too, scratched into the floor, the bedpost, the ceiling. Circles. Eyes. Runes that pulsed faintly when looked at straight on, then disappeared when glanced from the side. Then Elise spoke. "I remember this place." Gabriel looked at her. "What?" She turned, her face pale. "I don't know how, but I've been here before, not just in dreams. When I was little." "This room, that bed." Gabriel stepped forward, heart hammering. "That's not possible." But she didn't answer him. She was staring into the black mirror. Her reflection didn't show. Gabriel joined her and looked into it. No reflection, just blackness. Then movement. Slow at first. A ripple. Like something far below the surface of still water. It began to rise. Gabriel tried to step back, but his feet were stuck. The room had changed around them, darker now, colder. The walls pulsed with a heartbeat that wasn't theirs. Elise was breathing fast, her mouth slightly open, her hands clenched at her sides. The blackness in the mirror broke. A pale hand pressed against the glass from the other side. Fingers long, with nails like needles, they scraped across the inside of the mirror, leaving trails of frost. Then a face appeared. It was Elise, not the one beside him. The one in the mirror looked older, hollow, her skin bruised, her lips torn, her eyes wide with silent screams. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. Then she raised her hands, both stitched shut at the wrists. Behind her, shadows gathered, faces with no mouths, limbs too long. Crawling. The mirror cracked. Gabriel grabbed Elise and yanked her back, just as the glass shattered outward, not inward. A blast of cold air hit them both, and the mirror exploded into shards that scattered across the room like teeth. But no one came out. Not yet. Instead, the wall behind the mirror revealed something else. A door. Not a real one. A hidden panel carved into the wood, covered in symbols that looked burned in rather than etched. In the center, another circle, another eye, closed. Gabriel reached out, But Elise caught his hand. "We need to think about this," she said. "What if this is the real door? The one they're trying to push us toward? We've come this far." Gabriel pressed his palm to the eye. It opened. The panel slid open silently, revealing a narrow corridor, hidden within the walls. Dust thick as snow clung to every surface. The air was tight. Breathing inside it felt like trying to inhale through cloth. They stepped in. The walls were covered in drawings, childlike, crude, done in charcoal or something darker. Each one showed the same scene. Over and over, a girl standing in front of a mirror and something crawling out of it. Over time, the girl began to change. Her eyes turned black, her limbs stretched, her smile widened too far. In the final drawing, the mirror was gone, and the girl was no longer there. Just a black smudge on the floor where she used to be. At the end of the corridor, a ladder led down into the dark. Gabriel looked at Elise. "I don't want to," she said, "but I think we have to." They climbed down. The air below was colder than even the basement had been, more still. At the bottom of the ladder, they stepped into a room neither of them had seen before. Not in dreams, not in visions. It was circular. Stone walls. Symbols covering every inch. In the center, another mirror. This one massive, cracked from corner to corner. Covered with chains. A figure knelt in front of it, wrapped in black cloth, unmoving. Gabriel stepped forward, whispering, "Hello." The figure raised its head, their mother's face, bruised, hollow, eyes leaking black tears. She opened her mouth to speak, and her jaw split in two. Something screamed, not from her, from the mirror behind her. The chains began to tighten. One by one, they started snapping. The room trembled, and the thing in the mirror began to wake up. It didn't sound like a scream. Not in the way humans scream. It was deeper, broader, like a sound that came from beneath the earth. From a throat too wide, from lungs filled not with air, but centuries of dust. It vibrated through the stones in the walls, through the marrow in Gabriel's bones. Elise fell to one knee, clutching her ears, her face twisted in pain. The figure kneeling before the mirror, the thing wearing their mother's face, didn't flinch. She simply watched them with dead eyes, black tears streaking her cheeks, as the mirror behind her began to bleed. It wasn't blood, not really. It was thicker, darker, something that smelled like rust and soil and spoiled milk. It ran from the cracks in the glass, slithering across the floor toward Gabriel's boots. Hissing as it moved, he stepped back instinctively, pulling Elise with him. The first chain snapped. It didn't break like metal. It tore like sinew. The sound it made was wet, not sharp. The others began to twitch violently, straining outward as though something massive on the other side of the mirror was pushing against them. Gabriel's eyes locked on the surface. For a moment, he thought it was just his reflection. Distorted, of course, like always. But then it blinked and smiled, the kind of smile that stretches too far, that carries hunger. "Elise," Gabriel hissed, "we need to leave. Now." But Elise was staring at the kneeling figure. "Mom," she whispered. The figure didn't move. "Elise, she's saying something." Gabriel listened. Barely audible, the figure was murmuring a phrase, over and over. A prayer. A warning. A curse. He couldn't tell. Her voice was hollow, scraping at the edges of language like a memory trying to find its shape. "Close the door. Don't let it finish waking." Then her eyes rolled back, and she convulsed, violently, as though something inside her was tearing free. The second chain snapped. The mirror pulsed. Not light, pressure. A wave of it rippled through the room, making the walls weep with moisture. Symbols on the stone began to glow faintly, one after another, in sequence, like dominoes lighting up in some ritual Gabriel didn't understand. "Elise!" Gabriel grabbed her wrist, yanking her toward the ladder. "It's coming through." She didn't argue. As they climbed, the final sound from the mirror followed them up. A breath, massive, ancient, like the exhale of something that had been asleep for far too long. When they emerged back into the hidden corridor, The door slammed shut behind them on its own. No lock, no handle, just gone. The path behind them was swallowed in shadow. They stumbled back into the child's bedroom, gasping, coughing, but something had changed. The room was clean. No dust, no cracked walls. The bed was made. The wallpaper was new. The toys had eyes again, and standing in the center of the room was a little girl. Elise froze. The girl looked up at them. Her mouth was stitched, just like the figure in the mirror, but she didn't seem in pain. Her hands were clasped in front of her. She wore a white dress, and her eyes, too large, too dark, studied them without fear. Gabriel didn't move. Neither did Elise. Then the girl pointed. Not at them. At the hallway behind them. They turned. Every door was now open, and from within each room, figures began to emerge. Not fast, not chaotic, calm. Like they were simply stepping out of hiding after a long nap. Men, women, children. Every one of them with stitched mouths. Some missing eyes. Some dragging themselves across the floor with twisted limbs. All silent. Elise whispered, "They're the ones from the mirror." Gabriel couldn't breathe. They turned back to the little girl. She was gone. Only the clean room remained, pristine and untouched. A low groan echoed through the house, and the temperature dropped. The floorboards beneath them began to split, not crack, but separate, like something underneath was opening its mouth. The figures in the hall turned in unison and began moving toward them. Slow, purposeful. Elise grabbed Gabriel's hand. Out the window. They didn't argue. He smashed it with his elbow, climbed through first, then helped her after. As her feet hit the dirt outside, a long-fingered hand reached through the glass behind them, but not fast enough. They ran. Back through the field, the trees, the dark edge of the forest that felt even thicker now than before. Something moved among the trunks. Something tall, following but not chasing, watching. The path wound unnaturally, twisting back on itself, trees bending in ways trees shouldn't. Still, they ran. Only when the light of day began to pierce the canopy did the woods relent. Their roots loosened, their grip eased. They found the car, still dead. But the road was visible now, so they walked. An hour later, they reached the edge of town. They didn't speak on the way home. When they stepped through the front door, the mirror in their hallway was waiting. It had changed again. Not in shape. In depth. It now reflected a room that wasn't theirs, a chamber lined with stone, covered in chains. At its center, the mirror from beneath the house, the one that was waking up, and just behind it, a silhouette, massive, smiling. They left the mirror untouched. No one spoke as they passed it. Gabriel and Elise moved like sleepwalkers through their house, blinking slowly at the bright sunlight that pooled across the floor. The brightness didn't match what they felt. It was all too normal, too untouched, and yet they knew something had changed. The air held a pressure now, low and buzzing, like a storm was trapped behind the walls, waiting to break loose. Gabriel locked every door, every window. He pulled the blinds. It didn't help. Every corner of the house looked familiar but felt slightly wrong. The table stood a little too close to the wall. The hallway seemed longer than it had before. The fridge made a low whirring sound that neither of them remembered ever hearing. At first, it felt like they were just being paranoid, trauma warping their senses. But then Elise opened the fridge, and every item inside was gone. Instead, it was full of soil. Wet, dark soil, packed tight against the shelves. A single fingernail stuck out of it like a tombstone. Elise didn't scream. She closed the fridge quietly and sat down at the kitchen table. Gabriel stood frozen. The last chain hadn't broken, he told himself. They hadn't seen it snap. That meant it wasn't too late. Whatever the mirror was, whatever lived behind it, hadn't crossed over fully. But then, what were the stitched mouth people? The girl in the bedroom? The thing in the wall? Had they already opened the door too wide? He turned to Elise. Do you remember her face? Her head jerked toward him slowly. Mom, he nodded. Yes, she said. But I don't think it's her anymore. He sat beside her. The quiet stretched long between them, broken only by the faint hum that now came from every light bulb in the house. A vibration, steady and low, like an insect stuck inside the glass. It got louder at night. That first night back, they both stayed awake. Gabriel sat at the foot of the stairs, facing the hallway where the mirror hung. Elise took the living room. They'd left the lights on. Every one of them. Flashlights within reach. Salt lined across the doors and windows. Symbols drawn in chalk above the thresholds. Copied from the ones they'd seen etched into the house's stone walls. Midnight passed quietly. But at 3:14 a.m., the mirror changed again. It didn't crack this time. It didn't pulse or shimmer. It opened. The surface rippled like water, and for one long moment, Gabriel swore he saw the stone chamber again. But now, the mirror at the center of that room was gone. Only a wide, round hole remained, black and deep. And someone was standing beside it. Not a child, not a figure, himself. Gabriel stared into the mirror, frozen. His double looked older, paler. Its skin hung from its bones like wax too close to heat. Its eyes were yellowed, weeping something thick. And its mouth, still stitched, but barely, began to tear as it smiled. Then it raised its hand and tapped the glass. Once, twice, 3 times. Tap, tap, tap. Elise came running, flashlight in hand. She skidded to a stop behind him and looked into the mirror. The image was gone. Now it simply reflected the hallway. Empty. "You saw something," she said quietly. He nodded. "I think it's learning how to use our faces." They didn't sleep. At sunrise, Gabriel checked every mirror in the house. The bathroom one had vanished completely, frame and all. The small compact Elise used for makeup was cracked and covered in something that looked like frost. Even the screen of the microwave now reflected only static, the distorted face of a child flickering in and out if stared at too long. They packed everything reflective into a bag and buried it 6 feet down in the backyard. It didn't matter. That night, Elise woke up to a knock. Not on the front door. From inside the wall, right behind her headboard, 3 knocks, followed by a faint sound, something wet being dragged. She didn't scream. She got up, crossed the room slowly, and pressed her ear to the wall. Nothing. But when she returned to bed, the words were scratched into her pillowcase. "You brought it back." She woke Gabriel. Together, they inspected the rest of the house. More scratches. On the underside of tables, behind the curtains, even inside the washing machine lid. Every message different, some warnings, others instructions. "The chains are cracking. It lives in silence. Close your eyes when it smiles. She is not your mother." Gabriel sat on the floor and wept, not from fear, from the growing certainty that they had triggered something far older than they could comprehend. This wasn't a ghost, not a possession. It wasn't something that could be blessed away or locked behind holy water and prayer. It was infection, a leak from somewhere else, a place that had waited too long, that had whispered through reflections for centuries until someone, them, looked too long. By the 3rd day, sleep became impossible, not because they were afraid, but because the dreams weren't waiting for sleep anymore. They began slipping into them while awake. Gabriel would blink and suddenly find himself back in the woods, back at the well. Only now, the water was rising and whispering his name. Elise would be staring at the television screen and see her own face on it, screaming, her mouth flapping like a puppet's, no sound. Then the mirror reappeared, the one they'd buried. It was sitting on the kitchen table one morning, still whole, still warm to the touch, and its reflection now showed a 3rd person standing behind them, someone in the corner. Still, watching, they turned, breath held. No one there. But a muddy footprint now marked the floor behind them, bare, child-sized, facing the mirror. That night, something changed again. Not in the house. In Elise. Gabriel noticed it when she spoke less, slept less, stared longer into windows. He caught her murmuring once, not to herself, but to her reflection in the darkened microwave screen. "Do you remember my face?" she whispered to it. Gabriel grabbed her and pulled her back. "Elise, don't talk to it." She blinked slowly. "I wasn't." "Yes, you were." She didn't deny it, did not either, just walked away. When he checked her room later that night, her mirrors were gone again. She'd smashed them, but the fragments had been reassembled on the floor, into a new shape, a circle, an eye, and it was weeping. Gabriel backed away slowly, because as he stared into that broken eye, he saw something rise behind his reflection, and this time, it reached out. Gabriel didn't scream, he couldn't. The thing in the reflection had already stolen that from him. It didn't lunge. It didn't hiss or bare teeth. It simply stood, not quite behind him, but inside the space that looked like behind him. Its arms hung wrong. Its face was mostly shadow, except for a mouth that never stopped moving, whispering words that didn't belong in this world. He stared for a second too long, just long enough to feel the glass warm beneath his skin, just long enough to hear something scrape from the inside of the mirror, and then he staggered back, heart rattling like a trapped bird. The pieces shifted, not rolled, not fell, shifted. The eye she had made on the floor didn't break, it simply blinked. A single twitch of shards, and then it went still. Gabriel didn't wait. He swept the pieces into a blanket, careful not to look directly at the reflections, and carried the bundle to the garage. Fire didn't work last time. They had tried. But something told him it didn't matter anymore. The mirror didn't need the glass to move between places now. The rules were changing. The space between what was real and what was waiting had thinned, and Elise was unraveling. It started small. She began speaking in her sleep again, but in a voice that was too low, too broken. Not hers. Gabriel caught her standing in the corner of the living room one night, long after midnight, whispering to the darkened television screen. She flinched when he touched her, but never turned around. When he called her name, she said nothing. She just watched her reflection. Each morning, she woke up more pale, her lips cracked, eyes bloodshot, but she claimed not to remember anything. And when Gabriel asked her what she saw in the mirror that first time, in that house, in the room, she finally answered him. "It was me," she said, "but not me now. Me from before. Before Mom disappeared." He waited. She took a long, shaking breath, and something behind me. Gabriel asked what. "I don't know," she whispered. "But it smiled with my mouth." He kept her in the living room after that. He covered every reflective surface. He lined the windows with cloth, unplugged the TV, removed every screen, polished metal, phone. Anything that could cast an image was gone, and for a short time it seemed to help, until the knocking returned. But not on glass. This time it came from inside the walls. 3 knocks, always 3, sometimes from the kitchen, sometimes from the vents, once from inside the bathroom drain. And then came the whispers, not out loud, not even in their ears, in their teeth. That was the only way Gabriel could describe it, like the words were crawling out of the roots of his jaw, into his skull. Dry, flaking syllables brushing against the edges of thought, like spider legs made of sound. One night, he heard Elise humming. He found her sitting in front of the hallway mirror. The original one, the one from the box. They'd never been able to get it off the wall. She had drawn symbols around it in ash and blood. Her fingers were blackened. Her mouth was moving, but not with the melody. Her mouth was sewn shut, not real stitches, flesh stitches. The kind you see in nightmares and can't forget after waking. Elise, her head snapped toward him, too fast, eyes wide and glassy. And then, like snapping out of a trance, she blinked. The stitches vanished, so did the ash, so did the blood. She was just sitting there, shaking. "Did it talk to you?" Gabriel asked. She didn't answer, because she didn't have to. That night, the mirror changed again. This time it showed their old house, the way it was years ago. Before the storm, before their mother vanished. Clean and warm, glowing with sunlight through the windows, and in the center of the reflection, a woman stood, smiling. Their mother. "Mom," Elise whispered. The woman raised a hand and waved. Gabriel held Elise back. "That's not her." But Elise didn't listen. The smile in the mirror widened, and in the background something passed through the kitchen. Tall, skeletal, dragging what looked like a bag of meat behind it. Elise didn't see it. Her focus was only on the woman, her mother, her maybe mother. "She looks so real," Elise said, tears in her voice. Then the woman stopped waving. Her smile didn't fade, but her skin began to peel, first from the face, then her hands, then the chest, sloughing off in long, wet strips, revealing not bone or flesh, but mirror. Beneath her skin was a surface of polished glass, stretching like silver muscle, reflecting Gabriel and Elise watching her from the other side. Then, the thing behind her stepped into view again. It was wearing Gabriel's face, not just his shape, his face. Over its head like a mask, it stared at them, and smiled too. The mirror cracked. Just a hairline. But it was enough. Elise screamed. The next day, everything was different. The sunlight didn't feel right. Colors in the house looked slightly desaturated, like an old photo losing ink. Their voices echoed oddly, even in small rooms. Clocks ticked slower. Water from the tap came out backward, like it fell up into the faucet before reversing and dripping back down. Gabriel turned on the flashlight. Its beam bent sideways. They stopped sleeping. The house didn't allow it. Every time their eyes closed, they dreamed of rooms that didn't exist. Full of whispers, children singing with mouths sewn shut, crawling toward them across ceilings that wept blood. And always, the figure in the background, watching, waiting. Then came the blood on the windows, not from inside, from outside, long smears, small handprints. A face, print on the glass like someone had pressed their cheek against it, breathing slowly until condensation bloomed. And always 3 knocks, each louder than the last. Gabriel tried to run. The car wouldn't start. They tried to walk. The neighborhood was gone. Not changed. Gone. They walked a mile and ended up back at the house. The sky stayed the same shade of dusk no matter the hour. The sun no longer moved. The stars blinked in odd patterns. The moon flickered like a bad light bulb, and then Elise stopped speaking. She would move, eat, stare, but not speak. Not a word. Until one night when Gabriel asked, "Are you still in there?" She turned her head slowly, smiled with someone else's mouth, and whispered, "We opened it." Gabriel froze. "Who's we?" She stood, walked toward the mirror, pressed her hand against it, and the reflection smiled, but not the one in front of him, the one in the mirror. It was Elise, but not. Paler, thinner, hollow. Behind her, Gabriel's double approached. Both stared out of the mirror at him, smiling. Then Elise, his real Elise, the one in the room, whispered again, "They want to trade places." Gabriel didn't move. Couldn't. The sentence hung in the air like smoke, like something flammable just waiting for the wrong spark to turn everything into fire. They want to trade places. Elise stood still beside the mirror, her fingers still pressed to its surface, and for the briefest second, it looked like her hand had begun to sink in, like the glass wasn't solid anymore, like it had begun to soften under her touch. The mirror rippled. Gabriel stepped forward, grabbing her wrist, yanking her away. She turned on him with a look he didn't recognize, somewhere between confusion and hatred. Her eyes were distant, her pupils slightly too large, her expression unreadable. "Elise," he said, voice low, careful. She blinked. Her face softened, lips trembled. "I didn't mean to," she started, but stopped, holding her head like something inside was clawing to get out. Gabriel looked back at the mirror. Their reflections were still there, still smiling, still waiting. His double placed a hand on Elise's reflected shoulder, gently, like a lover or a caretaker. It whispered something into her ear. Her mirrored self laughed without opening her mouth. The sound didn't come through the glass, but Gabriel felt it in his chest. It was wrong. thin and brittle, like glass shattering inside a tin box. Elise, don't listen to them. They don't lie, she whispered. Gabriel felt a chill spread down his spine, colder than anything the house had thrown at them so far. Not because of what she said, but how she said it. Like a truth. Like a fact. Like she'd known it all along but only just remembered. They showed me something, she said, eyes still fixed on the mirror. A world without pain, without forgetting, without grief. It's beautiful, Gabe. No. He snapped, louder than intended. It's not beautiful, it's a trap. But she didn't respond. She reached into her pocket and pulled out something Gabriel hadn't seen before. A shard. A piece of the original mirror they'd buried. It glinted under the weak kitchen light. Its edges were red, not with reflection but blood. Elise put it down. I didn't get this from the yard, she said softly. It was under my pillow. Gabriel's mouth went dry. They're getting through, she continued. They said one more. Just one more crack in the veil, and they'll walk here like we walk across the street. He stepped closer. Slowly. Elise, look at me. Really look at me. She turned, and something shifted in her face. The real her blinked back into focus for a moment. Eyes wide, lips parting in fear. I can't hold it back, she whispered. Then she screamed. A raw, jagged sound that tore through the room like a siren. The lights overhead flickered. Burst, rained glass. The walls groaned. The mirror swelled. The frame warping outward like something was pushing against it from the other side. Hands began to press into the glass, dozens of them. Long, thin fingers, nails like needles. Scraping. Gabriel grabbed Elise and pulled her away again. This time she came willingly. The mirror cracked once, then again. Then silence. No shatter, no explosion. Just stillness. Until the whisper. From the mirror. From everywhere. We want what you don't need anymore. Gabriel shook his head. You can't have her. Another crack. The mirror began to bleed again. Thick, black, syrupy fluid that pooled on the floor. Gabriel backed away, dragging Elise behind him. He didn't know where to go anymore. Every room had mirrors once. Every window could reflect. The darkness itself was starting to reflect. There were too many doors in the house now. More than when they'd moved in. More than were possible. He turned around and saw a hallway that hadn't existed before. Narrow, pulsing, lined with candlelight. It stretched too far, bending toward a horizon that shouldn't have fit within the structure of the house. At the end of it stood a door. Not wood, glass. Cracked. Gabriel felt his mouth go dry. They built another one, Elise said, her voice distant. Gabriel shook her. Built what? A way out. Out of what, Elise? Her face twitched. As Gabriel turned, heart racing. We're leaving. Now, this house, this place. I don't care where we end up, but we're not staying. Elise didn't argue. Not anymore. She followed him, stumbling, weak, but conscious. They made it to the front door. Gabriel reached for the knob. It wasn't there. Just blank wood. He ran to the back. Same thing. Every door was sealed now. Not boarded. Not locked. Gone. The windows were just paintings now. Frozen images of the outside world, unmoving, unchanging. The light that came through them didn't touch the floor. Elise, Gabriel said, where are the real doors? She didn't answer. She was staring up at the ceiling. Following something only she could see. Gabriel turned. There was something in the shadows above them. Crawling. Twisting. Clinging to the ceiling like mold with too many limbs. Its body pulsed with each movement. Faces blinked from its skin, some asleep, some wide awake. One of them wore his face. Another wore hers. Then the voices started. Not whispers. Cries. From the walls. From the floor. From the mirrors they thought they'd destroyed. You called us. You looked too long. You opened the gate. Gabriel grabbed the salt from the shelf and threw a line across the floor between them and the thing on the ceiling. It shrieked. Not aloud, but inside their heads. Elise stumbled again. Gabe, he caught her. She was shaking violently. They're inside, she whispered. They're showing me things. Things I did. Things I will do. No, he said firmly. No, they're lying. They're not. Her eyes blood, not tears, glass. Tiny shards sliding down her cheeks like glittering scars. Gabriel screamed. Everything shook. And then it stopped. The house went still. The mirror went dark. Elise collapsed. Gabriel caught her, held her, screamed her name over and over again, but she didn't move. Didn't respond. Her body was cold, her chest still. But her mouth smiled. And from the mirror across the room, her reflection blinked. Gabriel sat on the floor with Elise's body in his arms, but it didn't feel like her anymore. Her skin had gone still and waxy in a way that suggested more than unconsciousness, less than death, but not life either. Her mouth remained parted in that smile, one that didn't fit her face, one that curved like it had been carved on by a stranger's hand. He couldn't bring himself to close her eyes, because even though they no longer blinked, they watched. Through him, past him, to the mirror across the room that was no longer just glass. It breathed, slowly, steadily. The mirror rose and fell, expanding and shrinking in tiny, impossible movements. Not optical illusion, not madness. It was breathing. And the thing inside it, the Elise on the other side, was breathing with it. Her chest moved in perfect rhythm. She stood in a room that no longer mirrored their own. A reflection disconnected from its source. Behind her, the walls were stone and dripping. Chains swung from the ceiling. And something else was there, always just out of frame. Something huge, shifting, keeping to the corners where the light refused to go. Gabriel's heart pounded. This couldn't be real, and yet it was. His hand trembled as he brushed Elise's hair back from her face. Her skin was cold, but not lifeless. She was caught somewhere in between, suspended, tethered, and something on the other side of the glass was holding the string. The mirror thing, that version of Elise, began to move. She tilted her head, mimicking the gesture he'd just made, brushed her hair back the same way. Then she lifted her hand and pressed it to the glass, slowly, deliberately. Gabriel's pulse spiked. He stood, stepping toward the mirror before he could stop himself. Something about the way she looked at him dragged him forward. Her eyes had the same color, same flecks of hazel, same scar on her brow from the time she fell off her bike at 9. But she wasn't Elise, because her lips began to move, and the stitches were back, only now they writhed. The thread moved like worms, pulling tighter, twitching with every motion, and behind her, closer now, was the thing he'd seen before. A mass of limbs and mouths, like a cathedral of skin, rising behind her in worshipful silence. It pulsed as the mirror pulsed, and then the thread snapped. Her mouth opened, and the voice that poured from it didn't belong to her at all. "You let us in," it said flat and heavy. Gabriel staggered back. "No," he whispered. "We didn't know. You looked." She pressed her hand harder against the glass, and now he saw it. Her palm was leaving a print, not in mist, not in light, but blood, dark, almost black. It smeared across the surface like a wet signature. Gabriel turned, his breath catching. Elise, the real Elise, gasped. Her body spasmed once in his arms, eyes wide, mouth stretched in a silent scream. And then, like a puppet with cut strings, she went limp again. In the mirror, the other version laughed. That sound, it hit Gabriel like a fever. 1,000 voices all layered, all perfectly in sync, echoing off his bones. It wasn't just her voice. It was his mother's, strangers, the priest from the church, children crying, and something else, something older. Then she said it. Trade accepted. No, Gabriel said. No, she didn't say yes. The mirror cracked. Just a hairline. But it was spreading. He backed away, dragging Elise with him. The lights flickered. The walls shifted. Not moved, shifted, like the house had sighed. And in that sigh, he heard it again, the breathing. From beneath the floorboards, from inside the walls, from the air. This house, this trap, was alive now, fully awake. Gabriel dragged Elise upstairs. She was light, far too light, like her weight had been halved. Her skin felt less human now, colder, tighter. He laid her on the bed, uncertain of whether she'd ever open her eyes again. But when he looked at her reflection in the bedroom window, he saw her blink. The reflection moved. Her real body didn't. He turned the mirror away. Every reflective surface in the house began to darken. The microwave, the faucets, the framed photos with glass, each one became a new window. Each one showed a different version of Elise of himself, not acting like reflections, acting like watchers. Everywhere he turned, one of them would blink, one of them would smile. The worst part? Some of them weren't smiling maliciously. Some of them looked relieved, like they had been waiting for this, waiting to replace him. Gabriel found a hammer and shattered every surface he could find. It didn't help, because when he looked down at the puddle forming beneath the kitchen sink, he saw his reflection again, and it waved. He was losing the house, losing Elise, losing himself. Then came the whisper, not from outside, not from the walls, from inside his own head, a voice he hadn't heard since he was a boy. His mother. "Gabriel," she said softly, "come to the mirror. Just once more. I'll tell you how to fix it." He fell to his knees, pressing his hands over his ears. "No. You want to save her," the voice said, softer now. "You want her back." His eyes burned with tears. "I never wanted any of this. We just opened a box. That's all." "Boxes are doors," the voice said, "and doors are invitations. I didn't invite them." "Yes, you did," his mother whispered. "When you looked. When you believed." He stumbled to his feet and ran to Elise's side. Her chest rose once. Shallow. Her fingers twitched. "Stay with me," he whispered, brushing her hair away again. "Please." She didn't answer, but the room did. Behind him, the cracked mirror began to leak. Not liquid, not smoke, but something in between. A shimmering mist that shimmered like oil, curling across the floor, reaching for Elise's bed. He backed away, shielding her with his body. "Stop," he said to no one. The mist paused. Then, TRD Compieti, the mirror exploded, not outward, but inward. Shards vanished into a perfect black hole where the glass used to be, and something stepped through. Not Elise. Not him. Something that wore both their faces. It stepped from the mirror like a child crawling from the womb. Slow, slick, and eager to be seen. Its form was soft around the edges, unfocused, as if the world hadn't quite decided how it should look yet. But its face, that was the part it had perfected. It wore Gabriel's eyes, Elise's mouth, and something else stretched across the middle. A smile too wide. A nose too flat. It shifted with every blink, as though it were remembering how to hold the shape it had stolen. And it was smiling at him. At Gabriel, as if meeting an old friend at last. Gabriel backed up instinctively, placing himself between the thing and Elise's still body. His breath stuttered in his throat. The air around the creature had weight. The moment it entered the room, the temperature dropped to the kind of cold that felt permanent, the kind of cold that crept under your skin and settled in your bones. He watched its feet. Bare, wet, and wrong, squish against the wooden floorboards without leaving footprints. It glided instead of walked, and every time it tilted its head, something clicked inside its neck like bones trying to mimic emotion they didn't fully understand. "Why her?" Gabriel rasped. "Why us?" It blinked with Elise's lashes. "We are not new," it said. "You are just the first to stop looking away." Its voice was not one voice. It was many. Dozens. Hundreds. All speaking in perfect sync, layered atop one another, each one wearing a different emotion. Grief, mockery, rage. Gabriel clenched his fists. "You can't take her." The thing smiled wider. Its lips stretched until they began to tear. No blood came out, just silence. Then it whispered, "We already have." Behind Gabriel, Elise let out a soft, rasping breath. He turned so fast his neck cracked. She was moving, barely. Her fingers twitched again. Her lips parted slightly. A low moan rolled out from the back of her throat.
"Elise!"
he whispered, kneeling beside her. She opened her eyes. But they weren't her eyes anymore. They were mirrors. Tiny, perfect, glistening mirrors, reflecting his own horrified face back at him. And then, with an unnatural speed, she sat up. Gabriel scrambled backward across the floor, heart hammering like it wanted out of his chest. Elise, whatever this version of her was, tilted her head the same way the creature had. Her smile matched it, too. Too wide, too clean. From the corner of the room, the original creature laughed. "You're both awake now," it said. "That's good. It means the thinning is complete." Gabriel's hands gripped the base of the nightstand. He felt something, metal, a pair of scissors. His fingers closed around them like a reflex. He didn't know what they could do, only that it felt better to be holding something sharp in a world that had gone soft and dreamlike. "What do you want?" he whispered, though part of him didn't want the answer. The Elise thing tilted its head, mouth twitching with restraint. "To replace," it said, "to live in what you abandoned. Your world, your grief, your flesh." Gabriel stood. "I didn't abandon anything. We just opened the wrong thing." The room vibrated. The walls shifted. From inside the mirror, still cracked, still pulsing, dozens of fingers began to crawl through, inching along the frame, like insects testing the weather before stepping fully into daylight. "You invited us," the creature said. "Your sorrow was the key, your need for answers. The wound you never let close." Behind him, Elise stood up. Her movements were staggered, like a child wearing new shoes. Her head twitched twice before she took a step. Then another. Her feet didn't leave prints either. Gabriel held the scissors between them. "Elise, if you're still in there, fight it." She looked at him. For a second, just one, he saw something real. A flicker. Her lip trembled. Her hands shook. Then the creature across the room let out a low growl, and the flicker died. "I said fight it!" he shouted, stepping closer. The Elise thing moved faster than it should have. 1 second, it was 6 feet away. The next, it was inches from his face. She leaned in, her breath icy. "She doesn't want to." Gabriel drove the scissors forward. They plunged into her shoulder, deep, too deep. There was no blood, no scream, just a long sigh. Her body twitched once. She stumbled back, blinking slowly. The creature in the corner let out a low, disappointed sound. Gabriel ripped the scissors free. "I'm not letting either of you take her. You don't get to choose anymore," the voice behind him said. He turned. Too late. The creature lunged. Its shape shifted midair, longer, darker, unraveling in the air like threads spinning from a nightmare. It hit him like wind, like fog made solid, and for a moment he couldn't breathe. Couldn't think, couldn't remember why he had come into the room. But then Elise screamed. A real scream, not the mirror's mimicry. Gabriel's head cleared, just long enough to roll out from under the weight. He gasped, staggered, and saw her clutching her own head, falling to her knees. "Gabriel, it's burning." He grabbed her, shook her. "Elise, come back, please," she sobbed. "I'm not all the way gone yet." The mirror began to ripple again. A crack zagged straight down the center, and from within it, something massive pushed forward. Not a person, not even a thing that pretended to be one, a form made of hundreds of mouths, arms, eyes, a giant, fleshy intelligence forcing itself into a world too small to hold it. A chorus of voices shrieked as it hit the barrier, echoing through the glass like wind through a storm drain. Elise looked at Gabriel. "Break it," she said. "The mirror. While the gate is cracked." He didn't hesitate. He picked up the scissors and hurled them. They struck the mirror dead center. The glass didn't just shatter. It screamed, a sound that tore the air open. That made the walls buckle and the ceiling split. The room bled darkness. The thing inside the mirror reeled, shrieking, dragging its malformed limbs back into the closing crack. The reflections flickered. Elise collapsed, and everything went still. Gabriel blinked. It was morning. Real morning. The sun poured through the window without flickering. The mirror was gone. Elise was breathing. And the house was quiet, too quiet. He leaned down beside her, hand on her cheek. Elise, her eyes opened. No mirrors, just brown, just her. She smiled weakly. You broke it. He nodded. But something in the pit of his stomach said it wasn't over, because behind her, on the wall, a tiny crack remained. And from it came a single wet whisper. Trade incomplete. The house felt hollow, not peaceful, not safe, hollow, like it had exhaled after screaming for too long. The silence wasn't comforting. It was the kind that presses against your ears until your own heartbeat sounds like footsteps. Gabriel sat beside Elise on the bedroom floor, the morning light pouring across her face like forgiveness, but the moment felt wrong. Too quiet. Too still. The kind of stillness that comes after something has stopped moving, but just before it starts again. The mirror was gone. Gone in the way the basement door had vanished, or the faces in photographs had slowly blurred away. Not broken. Not shattered. Erased. Where it had once hung, the wallpaper was untouched. No nail holes. No cracks. But there was something else. A thin fracture about 3 inches long, running diagonally across the wall, so faint it could have been mistaken for a scratch. But Gabriel knew better. He could feel it. Like standing near a window in winter, even when it's shut, some part of you just knows the cold is still trying to come in. He didn't tell Elise right away. She was pale, weak, barely conscious. She looked like someone who had just woken from a long illness, not a possession. Her eyes no longer shone like glass. Her voice was her own again, quiet, tired, cracking around the edges. But something in the way she moved was different. Careful. Like her body no longer felt like home. They stayed upstairs for hours, afraid to step into the hall, not because of what they might find, but because of what they might not. The danger, for now, was gone. But in its place was the fear of absence, and what that absence could hide. The walls no longer whispered. The floor no longer breathed. But that wasn't relief. That was waiting. Gabriel eventually helped Elise down the stairs. She moved slowly, clinging to the railing, eyes darting across every corner. There were fewer shadows now, but the light didn't feel right. It illuminated, sure, but it didn't warm. It was like being under a spotlight on an empty stage. In the kitchen, the mirror on the microwave had returned. But now it was just a black square. No reflection. No light. Gabriel placed a towel over it and taped the edges. Elise didn't speak, only nodded once. They didn't touch the television. Didn't risk the bathroom. Instead, they sat at the kitchen table. Elise finally broke the silence. When I was inside, it didn't feel like a place. Gabriel didn't look up. What did it feel like? A person, she said. No, a mind, like a consciousness, but ancient and angry. He nodded, slowly. It wants in. She nodded back, and we gave it a crack. Neither of them said anything after that. The sun began to set. They hadn't eaten. Their stomachs growled, but food felt like a distraction. A trick. Hunger reminded them they were still human. Still grounded. But every time Gabriel blinked, he could still see the thing inside the mirror. How it moved, how it wore his face, Elise's mouth. He remembered the wet sound of its laughter, the stitched lips twisting open with promises that weren't words. He checked the wall again after dark. The crack had grown, only slightly, barely more than a hair's width longer, but it was growing. He pressed his palm to the wallpaper. It was cold. The kind of cold that didn't match the air in the room. The kind that pulsed. He pulled away, and his fingers left behind faint condensation. Like breathing on a window pane, Gabriel grabbed a pencil from the junk drawer and marked the edge of the crack on the wall. Elise watched from the table. That won't stop it. I know, he said, but it'll tell me how fast it's moving. She paused, then said something she hadn't in days. I think we should leave. Gabriel looked at her, heart clenching. He wanted to say yes. God, he wanted to say yes. Grab the keys, run, never look back. But he couldn't. We tried, he said. Remember, she did. She remembered the roads that looped back to the house, the woods that moved, the streets that vanished. Their town had folded in on itself like a map burned at the edges. They weren't just inside the house anymore. They were inside its mouth. Later that night, Elise woke him from where he'd fallen asleep on the couch. "I heard something," she whispered. He sat up. "What?" She didn't speak, just pointed. To the wall, to the crack. It had deepened. No longer just a line, now a fracture. The wallpaper around it had begun to peel. Tiny flakes on the floor. And there was something else. Something he didn't notice before. A sound. Breathing. Not loud, not even constant. Just once every few minutes. A soft inhale. A slower exhale. Coming from inside the wall. Gabriel stepped closer. Held his ear against the crack. The breath came again. Right on cue. He staggered back. Elise was already crying. She knew what that meant. "It's alive," she whispered. He shook his head. "It always was. No, Gabe, I mean here. Not just the mirror. It's in the house now." They didn't sleep that night. And when dawn broke, the crack had spread into the ceiling. That morning, they found a note taped to the front door. But it wasn't paper. It was flesh. Stretched thin. Written on in something black and thick. "We are almost ready. Your world will make a good reflection." Gabriel dropped it, bile rising in his throat. Because beneath the note, on the doormat, sat something else. The box, the one that started it all. And inside, once again, was a mirror. But this one was different. It was perfect. Uncracked. Polished. And it already reflected the room behind them. Except in the reflection, they weren't there. Someone else was. Something else. Standing where they stood, smiling. Waiting, they didn't move. Couldn't. The box sat like a ticking heart on the doorstep, pulsing with the quiet threat of inevitability. Gabriel stared at it, his hands clenched into white, knuckled fists at his sides. He didn't touch it, didn't step closer. But the mirror inside stared back, clean, flawless, perfectly round like the eye of something that didn't need to blink. And behind the gleaming surface, the reflection showed the house's front hallway exactly as it stood, except it was off. Too still, too symmetrical. Every object frozen mid-breath, and there, standing exactly where Gabriel and Elise should have been, were two figures. Not imitations, not distortions, duplicates. Down to the scar on Gabriel's eyebrow, the chipped nail polish on Elise's thumb, even the blood stain on the hem of her shirt from the day they shattered the original mirror. These reflections didn't move, didn't breathe, just stared back, unblinking, smiling. Elise's voice was barely audible. "They've already replaced us." "No," Gabriel whispered. "Not yet. Not unless we accept it. Not unless we look too long." But even as he said it, his eyes were fixed on the image. His own eyes looking back at him. His mouth curved in that impossible smile. That version of him knew something he didn't. It was calm, confident, and it wanted to be seen. He slammed the door shut. It didn't matter. When he turned around, every mirror in the house had returned. Every one they had destroyed. The bathroom, the television screen, the metal of the toaster, the hallway wall, all restored. Not where they had been, but where they wanted to be. Angled, waiting. Gabriel backed away slowly. Elise. She came around the corner with something in her hand. A hammer. Without speaking, she smashed the bathroom mirror. The glass shattered into hundreds of pieces. They scattered across the tile floor, each one still reflecting the bathroom. But not this bathroom. A different one, filthier, moldering. With something crawling across the ceiling, they stepped back. Each shard showed a different angle of that same nightmare version of their house. In one, a cracked crib rocked on its own. In another, a dog without skin lay panting in the corner. In the largest shard, Gabriel saw himself, eyes black, hands soaked, whispering to a wall covered in mouths. They blinked, and the images vanished. The shards now reflected only their panicked faces. "Why are they giving them back?" Elise asked, voice trembling. "Why now?" Gabriel shook his head. "Because they're ready. Because whatever was leaking through that first crack is here now. Fully." He turned back toward the front door, toward the box. It was gone, but the mirror inside it was now mounted back on the wall, No nail, no stand, no tape, just hovering, perfectly centered. And in the reflection, they were gone. No duplicates, no house, just the thing. The mass they had only seen in fragments before, now whole. A figure of impossible size, filling a black space that rippled and breathed like a womb. Its body was made of faces, stitched and layered, mouths sewn shut or locked in endless silent screams. Its eyes were wide and bright, unblinking, watching him through the glass. And then it spoke. No sound came, but Gabriel understood every word, not through ears, but through thought, through feeling. Tshy lo kis ten, t chil etwsn. Elise stepped beside him, her jaw clenched. What does it want now? She asked, but she already knew. The house shuddered. The lights flickered. The smell of copper filled the air. From every corner, whispers returned. Only now they overlapped in perfect rhythm. Trade, trade, trade. Gabriel stepped forward. What's the price? The whispers stopped. The mirror dimmed, and a single word appeared across its surface, written in frost that dripped sideways like gravity had changed direction. Truth. He swallowed. What truth? The mirror didn't answer. Instead, the reflection shifted again, this time showing something they hadn't seen before. The attic. A room they hadn't been in since their mother disappeared. It was darker than it should have been. The window up there had always been tiny, cracked, and barely let light through. But in the mirror, the attic glowed faintly, illuminated by dozens of candles that pulsed in unison like a heartbeat. And at the center of the room sat an object they didn't recognize. A chair, high-backed, wooden, and strapped to it was a figure. Still, slumped, unmoving. Gabriel's stomach dropped. No, the mirror zoomed in, as if the glass itself wanted them to see. It was their mother, or what was left of her. Her skin was pale and loose, her face contorted into an expression of eternal fear. But her eyes were open, still moving, still aware. The mirror pulsed again, and her voice, emerged, not from the glass, from the ceiling, from above them. Gabriel, Elise, they froze. It wasn't the same voice they'd heard from the mirror before, not twisted, not echoed. It was hers, broken, weak, but hers. She's alive, Elise whispered, falling to her knees. No, Gabriel said. She shouldn't be, she is. They didn't wait. They ran up the stairs, two at a time. The attic door loomed above them, closed, untouched for years. Gabriel hesitated, hand hovering over the handle. We never opened this, he whispered. Elise stared at him. She went up here the night she vanished. Gabriel turned the knob. The door creaked open. The room was exactly as the mirror had shown, candles, shadows, and a chair in the middle. And there, strapped to it, was their mother. Alive. Breathing. Her eyes locked onto Gabriel's the moment he stepped inside. She tried to speak, but her lips were sewn shut with thread the color of rust. Elise screamed. Gabriel stumbled forward. What did they do to you? Their mother shook her head violently, eyes wide with warning. She looked past him. Gabriel turned, and saw it, a second mirror. Tall, thin, standing behind the door, and in it their mother stood up, smiling, her lips unsewn, her body whole. But it wasn't her. Not really. The real one was still strapped to the chair. The one in the mirror stepped forward, right up to the glass. Truth, she whispered. We never left. You're still inside. Gabriel's voice caught in his throat. Inside what? The mirror flickered, and for a moment everything vanished. The attic, the chair, even Elise. He stood alone, surrounded by mirrors stretching into the black. Each one reflected him. Each one whispered one word, over and over. Trade, trade, he screamed. And the mirrors cracked in unison. He opened his eyes. Back in the attic. Elise sobbing, their mother gone. So was the mirror. But the truth remained. They had never escaped the mirror. Not really. They were still inside. And it was still watching. Gabriel didn't speak for a long time after the attic changed. He couldn't. Not from fear, not from exhaustion, but from the weight of realization pressing on his chest like a body laid across it. Elise sat near the now empty chair, Her knees pulled tight to her chest, rocking slightly, as if motion could keep her sane. The candles were still lit, flickering unnaturally, burning without melting. The air held the scent of smoke and something else, something that clung to their throats and made every breath feel like swallowing static. She had been there, their mother, for a moment, a heartbeat. Her body strapped down, her eyes alive, the real her, and then gone, replaced again. Or maybe not. Maybe she'd never been there at all. Maybe it was just one more illusion, one more cruel story crafted by the thing that watched from behind every surface that caught the light. Gabriel stood slowly. The floorboards creaked louder than they should have, as if each step offended the house. He looked toward the wall where the second mirror had stood. It was gone, but the wallpaper had peeled back in its shape. An imprint like the wall had missed it, and deep within that outline was the mark. The same one he'd seen carved into the trees, the basement stones, even Elise's dreams, a single, weeping eye surrounded by a ring of jagged lines. He touched it. The wall pulsed, a breath, not his. Then a whisper filled the room, low and quiet. Not like a voice, but like memory surfacing. "You're still dreaming, Gabriel. You've always been dreaming." He stepped back, heart hammering, his pulse ringing in his ears. "No," he said. "No. We left. We woke up. We broke the mirror." But even as he said it, he looked around and began to see the seams. The attic window, which had always been cracked, was now whole. The wooden chest in the corner had never existed before, yet there it was, perfectly aged, draped with dust. The nails in the floor were all identical, arranged in a grid too perfect to be natural. And the light from the candles, it didn't cast shadows. Not a single one. Gabriel turned to Elise. She looked up. "What if we didn't make it out?" he whispered. She blinked. What if when we looked into the mirror, really looked, we never stopped?" She stared at him, trying to follow his train of thought, but her eyes grew distant, unfocused. Gabriel continued. "What if this house, the one we think we're in, isn't real, not our real? What if we're still in there, Elise, inside the mirror?" She opened her mouth, but didn't speak, because she didn't need to. He already knew the answer. This place, this version of their home, it wanted to feel real. It wanted them to believe. Because belief was permission. Belief was the crack in the wall that never stopped widening. The house was an echo chamber, a recursive loop. Every mirror they'd broken had been replaced. Every room they'd fled had reshaped itself. Every escape led back to the beginning. Elise began to shake. Her voice trembled. "If this is still the mirror, how do we get out?" Gabriel didn't answer, because he didn't know. But the crack in the attic wall did. It spread, right down the center. A jagged, ugly thing that bled black liquid like ink. It ran down the paneling and pooled on the floor, where it began to form letters. ASKT Raphael ET1. Gabriel stared at the message as Elise backed away. "I don't want to look anymore," she said. "I know." He walked to the dusty chest in the corner and opened it. Inside was a mirror, not one of glass, but of water, a flat, black basin filled with liquid that rippled without touch. In its surface, Gabriel saw nothing at first, just swirling darkness. But as he leaned closer, the liquid began to show him something. Not a reflection, a memory. The night their mother disappeared, he saw her, standing in the attic, alone, crying, whispering into a handheld mirror, her fingers tracing that same weeping eye. She wasn't afraid, she wasn't resisting, she was begging. "Please," she had whispered, "take me instead. Just leave them alone." And then her reflection smiled, but she didn't. The mirror in her hands shattered, and the room changed, darkened, split. The walls began to breathe, the floor twisting beneath her feet, and something came through. Gabriel pulled back, gasping, his breath ragged. He looked at Elise, who was shaking her head, weeping silently. "She offered herself," he whispered, "to protect us." But it didn't keep its promise. Elise was staring at the floor now. "No," she said. "It never wanted her. It wanted us. From the beginning. The mirror in the basin rippled again. And this time it showed something else. Not memory, not reflection. A door, stone, cracked, marked with runes. It pulsed with the same breath as the house. Gabriel understood instantly. A gate. Elise looked up. To what? He didn't answer. He dipped his hand into the basin. The surface rippled again, and a jolt of something alive shot through his spine, lighting his veins with static. For a moment, he wasn't in the attic anymore. He stood in the stone chamber, face to face with the gate. On the other side, he saw the world they had left behind. Not their house, not their town, but reality. Dull, imperfect, but real. He reached for the door. It didn't open. A voice came, all around him. Truth has a price. If you want to return, you must leave something behind. He staggered back, hand burning, heart pounding. Elise caught him as he collapsed. What did it say? She asked. He looked at her, eyes glassy. If we want to leave, one of us has to stay. She went still. Stay, he nodded, to keep the gate open, to hold the door. Otherwise it closes behind us. A long silence passed between them. Then Elise, voice hollow, said that's what she did. He nodded. Their mother hadn't just disappeared. She'd sacrificed herself. Gabriel took a breath that felt final. I'll do it. Elise's eyes filled with fresh tears. No, you have to go. You're stronger. You fought it longer. No, Gaby, don't. The mirror basin pulsed again. The stone door reappeared, now slightly ajar, a way out, but only for one. The house began to tremble. It knew they had decided. Gabriel stepped back toward the basin. Elise clutched his arm. No, please. Don't leave me. I already did, he whispered. When I opened that box, when I made you follow me. This is how I fix it. Elise sobbed as he placed her hand into the liquid. She vanished. A blink, a breath, gone, and Gabriel stood alone in the attic again. Only now. The walls stopped shaking. The mirror didn't ripple. The house was calm. He sat in the chair, closed his eyes, and listened. Far away, in the real world, Elise gasped awake on the front lawn of a normal house on a normal street, the sun warm and safe above her. She was free, but somewhere behind the glass, a door closed, and Gabriel stayed, watching, holding the gate. While the reflections smiled in the dark, Elise didn't move for a long time. She lay on the grass, eyes wide, chest heaving, sunlight flooding her face like a baptism. The warmth was real. The wind was real. She could hear birdsong, uneven, chaotic, alive in a way nothing inside that house had been. And yet, even as she clutched at blades of grass and felt the weight of the sun on her skin, the truth sat in her stomach like a stone. Gabriel was gone. Not dead, worse, trapped. She sat up slowly, every bone in her body stiff as though she'd spent days in a coffin. The house behind her loomed quiet and unchanged. A suburban two-story with chipped paint, a crooked mailbox, and no hint of the horror it had contained just hours before. If someone had passed by on the sidewalk, they would have seen nothing more than an old house with drawn blinds and dead grass. Not a prison. Not a parasite. Not a mirror that grew hungrier every time someone looked too long. Elise turned back to face it fully. No reflection in the windows. No sound. The door remained shut, and yet she could feel it pulsing. Not visibly, but deep inside. A presence. A heartbeat. It wasn't done with her. It never would be. Gabriel was still in there. She remembered the way he'd looked as he dipped her hand into the mirror basin. Calm. Resigned. Already fading. She remembered the shimmer in the air, the sensation of falling upward, the heat that burst in her chest the moment he vanished. And then, light. The sun. The outside. But she hadn't come back alone, because now every shadow she passed looked slightly too deep. Every pane of glass, storefronts, car mirrors, phone screens, held movement that didn't belong to her. She saw him once in the corner of her eye. Just a flicker, his face in a puddle by the curb, lips parted in warning. By the time she turned to look, he was gone. The mirror world had thinned, and she had returned marked. She wandered in a daze half, listening to the world around her traffic. Birds, wind. It all sounded like noise layered over silence. Her ears strained for that whisper she'd come to know so well. That voice behind her eyes. The one that spoke only when she was most alone. That night, Elise didn't go home. There was no home to go back to. She found a motel near the edge of town. Paid cash. Said little. The woman at the front desk looked at her for half a second too long, as if seeing something behind her shoulder. Elise locked the room, drew the curtains, unplugged the TV, covered the mirror with a towel, and sat on the bed with the lights off. But even in darkness, she could feel it watching. Not Gabriel. It. The thing with 1,000 eyes and her brother's voice stitched across its mouth. The thing that had stood behind the mirror long before she or Gabriel were born. The thing that wanted out. Gabriel had sealed the gate. For now. But it had learned something from them. A new trick. A new crack. Love. Sacrifice. Those were the real doors. They had used grief to lure their mother in. Curiosity to bring Gabriel. But Elise, she had left through love. She had been given back. That was the part she didn't understand. Why would it let her go? Unless it wanted her to carry something with her. She stood abruptly, heart pounding, pulled the towel off the mirror, stared into it. At first, just her face. Then, behind it, the shape of a room not her own. A chair, a boy, sitting, waiting, and in the reflection, Gabriel turned his head slowly and looked directly at her. Not smiling, not warning, just watching. His eyes were still his, but tired, like he was holding something too heavy for too long. She whispered his name, and the glass rippled. A whisper rose from nowhere. Elise, not from the mirror. From under the bed, she stepped back, breath shallow. She hadn't brought the house with her. She had brought the gate. That was the truth no one had told her. It didn't need the house, or the mirrors. It needed her. She was the last link now. The only one still between this world and that one. And cracks form fastest in the most fragile places. Her grief, her guilt, her love for Gabriel. She dropped to her knees and looked under the bed. Empty. But she heard it again. Breathing. From the walls. From the sink. From inside her head. She ran to the mirror, placed both hands on the glass. It burned. Let him go, she whispered. Take me instead. The mirror shimmered. Her reflection smiled. Then spoke in Gabriel's voice. You already did. She staggered back, fell, screamed. But no one heard. Because outside, in the street below, people passed by without looking up. The motel sign flickered. And in every car mirror, every window, every drop of rain caught in the light, Elise's reflection didn't quite match. In one, she smiled too early. In another, her mouth didn't move when she spoke. In some, her eyes were mirrors. And in the bathroom of room 12, the glass finally cracked down the center. Just a little, but enough. The gate hadn't stayed shut. Gabriel hadn't sealed it. He'd only become its guardian. And now, it had a new way out. The mirror in the motel bathroom didn't just crack. It whispered. A sound like a breath held too long, released with the weight of centuries. Elise stared at it from the far side of the room, barefoot on the cold linoleum, her chest rising and falling too fast. The crack wasn't long, only a few inches. But it pulsed with a dull light that didn't come from any bulb. The kind of light that made shadows move wrong. It ran diagonally across the glass like a crooked smile. She knew what it meant. She didn't need to guess anymore. It wasn't just watching her now. It was reaching. She backed away until her shoulder hit the wall. She hadn't slept, hadn't eaten. Her body was breaking down in quiet ways. Skin graying under her eyes. Muscles twitching on their own. Her reflection hadn't blinked at the same time in 2 days. She'd been counting, testing, hoping. But now the truth was impossible to ignore. It wasn't just Gabriel trapped behind the mirror anymore. Something else had stepped into him. Or maybe it had always been there, waiting, and he'd just grown too tired to keep it out. Elise, the mirror croaked again, his voice. But stretched. It didn't come from the reflection's mouth. It came from inside the crack. She pressed a towel against the glass, trying to cover it again, her hands shaking. The moment the fabric touched the mirror, the towel caught fire. A quiet, colorless flame, no heat, just disintegration. It dissolved in her grip, the ashes falling in slow, silent spirals to the floor like snow in reverse. The mirror pulsed again. We are closer now. She ran from the bathroom, slamming the door behind her, then stared at it like it might follow. It didn't. Not yet. But she could hear it. Not Gabriel. Something using him like a doorway. Its voice was no longer trying to seduce her. It didn't beg. Didn't lie. It knew it didn't need to. The crack in the glass was enough. Just like the first mirror. Just like the basement. Every crack was a mouth. And mouths opened eventually. Her phone vibrated. She hadn't touched it in days. Had turned it off, tried to bury it in a drawer, but somehow it sat now on the nightstand, screen glowing. A notification, one word. Look, she couldn't. She picked it up, hands trembling, and tossed it into the sink. It hissed on impact, burned bright for half a second, and then shut off, screen bubbling. Elise didn't scream. She just stood in the center of the room, breathing in silence. But something had changed. She knew it the moment she stepped toward the window. The world outside was too still. Cars lined the street, but none moved. People walked the sidewalks, but none made sound. The trees no longer swayed. A man on a bike stood frozen mid-turn. The air hung heavy with the tension of a paused film. Even the birds overhead didn't flap. Time had stopped. Or maybe she'd stopped. Or maybe. This wasn't the real world anymore. Not entirely. She reached for the curtain to draw it closed. Her reflection appeared in the window first. But it wasn't doing what she was doing. It was smiling. Then it raised its hand, before she moved, and it pointed. Not at her, but over her shoulder. She turned, and the mirror in the bathroom had opened. Not shattered, not cracked, opened. Like a mouth. Like a door, a soft wind pushed out from it. Cold and damp and heavy with the smell of soil and old metal. And from inside the mirror came a figure. At first, just a silhouette. Then features formed, her face, her hair, her body, but not her. It stepped out of the glass with impossible grace, feet hovering just above the floor, its mouth sewn shut in black wire. Its eyes glistened like frost. The other Elise. The one that hadn't blinked. The one that had been waiting. Elise stepped back. The room darkened. Not from the loss of light, but from the weight of presence. The duplicate took a step forward, her movements perfect replicas. Her arms swayed just as Elise's did when she was nervous. Her breathing matched. Her heartbeat echoed in Elise's chest. Then the thing spoke without opening its mouth. You are hollow now. Let me in. Elise reached for the door. It didn't open. The lock was gone. Not stuck. Gone. She was sealed in. The mirror creature tilted its head as if amused. Gabriel saw the truth, it said. He knew the trade was never about escape. It was about invitation. Elise backed into the far corner, heart pounding. You're not real, she whispered. You're just another mask. Exactly, the reflection said. And soon, I'll wear you better than you ever did. It stepped closer, and the moment its foot touched the floor, the walls of the motel breathed. Swelled outward, then tightened. Dust fell from the ceiling like dandruff from a dying star. Elise closed her eyes, thought of the first mirror, the box, her mother's voice, Gabriel's sacrifice. The thing fed on invitation. It could only enter what it was welcomed into, and she had never welcomed it. Not yet. Not fully. She opened her eyes and screamed, not in fear, but in rage. You're not me. The thing paused. You want to be, Elise snarled, but you never will. Its head tilted. You're a shadow pretending to understand the shape of light. You're a lie dressed up in my face. The creature stepped back, only slightly, but Elise saw it, a flicker, a moment of doubt. She ran forward and grabbed the motel's iron lamp from the desk, and without hesitating, she swung it straight at the mirror. The glass shattered, but it didn't break like normal. It ripped. The light inside the mirror, world spilled out like ink and ash and steam. The creature howled. 100 voices, not hers, all screaming in unison. Its body fractured midair, glitching between forms. Elise, Gabriel, her mother, the priest from the church, the girl with the stitched mouth, all layered over one another like a broken slideshow. And then it folded in on itself. Gone. The mirror vanished. The bathroom returned to silence. The wind picked up again outside. Time moved. A bird flew past the window, and Elise collapsed to the floor, not in relief, not in safety, but in understanding. She had stopped this one. But mirrors don't need just one crack. They only need the idea of one. The eye was still open, and in every reflection across the city, car windows, elevator doors, glass screens, a new version of her was learning to smile. Morning came too quickly, dragging with it the illusion of peace. Elise stepped out of the motel room, as if the air itself might turn to smoke the moment she exhaled. The wind carried the scent of warm pavement and distant fires. Her eyes were dry, her limbs heavy, and her reflection had stopped mimicking her. That was the only reason she dared step outside. The mirror was gone. The mimic, gone. But the silence in her bones told her the game wasn't over. It had just changed. The street was awake now. Cars moving, people walking, children biking along the sidewalks like everything was fine. Like the world hadn't split open beneath their feet. She watched a woman push a stroller past her motel door, smile politely, and continue down the block. The baby in the stroller turned its head toward Elise and didn't blink. Not once. Not even when the sunlight struck its eyes. She turned away fast. Too fast. Everything looked normal now. And that was exactly what terrified her most. The town had reset. Not healed. Reset. Rebuilt itself around her presence like a stage around an actor who no longer knew her lines. The people moved with a rhythm that was just a little too practiced. Not quite robotic, but too smooth. Too coordinated. At the cafe across the street, a man sipped coffee alone. He stared into the reflective window, not at the people walking by, but at himself. And the moment Elise looked at his face, his reflection smiled. But he didn't. She crossed the street anyway, eyes down, chest tight, every nerve on alert. The glass of the cafe window showed every table perfectly, including one at the far end that wasn't actually there when she glanced inside. It showed her, sitting alone, sipping tea, smiling. But she hadn't stepped inside yet. She turned from the glass, heart thudding. It was spreading, not just in mirrors now, in reflections, any surface, any flicker of resemblance. The barrier between worlds had been more fragile than she realized, and Gabriel's sacrifice had only slowed the collapse, not stopped it. She needed answers, direction, something, anything. So she went where she always went when the world felt wrong, back to the church. The same broken, down cathedral where Father Henley had once warned her, years ago, about doorways that don't open with hinges. The building looked smaller now, as if it had sunken into the ground, aged not from time, but from watching too much. She pushed open the doors and stepped inside. The air was cold, not from weather, from memory, from weight. The place hadn't been touched in years. Yet the symbol still burned on the wall behind the altar, the weeping eye, circled in flame, etched into the stone like it had never been gone, like it had been waiting for her return. She stepped forward, boots crunching over dust and old leaves. The sanctuary was empty, until it wasn't. "Hello, Elise," she spun. A woman stood at the far end of the pews, half-shadowed, her face familiar, not from life, from the mirror. Elise took a slow step back. "Who are you?" The woman smiled sadly. "I was like you. Once." "What do you mean?" "I looked too long," she said, voice hollow. "I believed, and they found me." Elise studied her closely now. The woman's face was human, but soft around the edges, like memory after trauma. Her hands flickered at the fingertips, as if unsure whether they were solid. Her reflection in the stained glass behind her moved a second too slow. "They're coming through, aren't they?" Elise whispered. The woman nodded. They already are. She moved toward Elise, slow, careful. You're marked now. You carry the scent of the gate. You'll never truly be unseen again. Can I stop it? You stopped one, the woman said. You broke a mirror, and that slowed the breath. But you didn't seal the wound. Elise swallowed. How do I do that? The woman paused. Then said the one name Elise hadn't spoken aloud in days. Gabriel. Tears stung her eyes instantly. He's still holding it, Elise choked. I can feel him. Yes, the woman said. But not for long. What do you mean? Because you left the gate open just enough to let light in. And they've learned from him. They know his shape now. They know his thoughts. His memories. Elise felt like her lungs had turned to glass. They're not just copying him, the woman said. They're replacing him. Piece by piece. Elise's knees nearly gave out. He's slipping. The woman nodded. And once he's gone, they won't need mirrors anymore. The church groaned. The stained glass above them cracked. A tiny fracture, right down the eye. Elise looked up. The reflection of the woman in the glass had vanished. She turned. The woman was gone, and on the back of the pew where she had stood, a single word had been carved into the wood. Hurry. Elise ran. Not back to the motel, not to the house, but toward the edge of town. Toward the woods. Toward the place she'd left. The old house waited at the end of a dead road, untouched by weather or time. The gate hadn't shut. The field still stood dry and dead. The well sat open like a yawning throat. She crossed the threshold again. This time, with her eyes open. With purpose. The house accepted her without protest. The stairs groaned once. The air dimmed. But it didn't resist. She ran to the attic. The chair was gone. The mirror was back, and in it, Gabriel stood. But not like before. This version of him twitched, glitched. His smile came too fast. His eyes stayed still. Hey, Elise, he said. Too calm. Too clean. She reached out, touched the mirror, felt it breathe. She whispered, You're not him. The reflection tilted its head. Does it matter? It asked. Behind it, in the mirror, the real Gabriel sat in the chair. Mouth sewn, eyes pleading, drowning in reflections that closed in around him. And Elise realized. He was almost gone. The mirror didn't shatter this time. It shivered. A sound like ice groaning underfoot echoed through the attic, but the glass held. Elise pressed her palm flat against it, staring into Gabriel's face, searching for anything real, but the version staring back was empty. Not blank, no, that would have been merciful. This was worse. It was practiced. Every twitch of his lip, the slight tilt of his head, the warmth in his voice, they were perfect. Too perfect. Like someone had studied her brother so intimately they could now wear him like a glove. The false Gabriel smiled. You came back. She didn't respond, because in the background of the reflection, behind him, she saw it. The real Gabriel, still seated, still stitched, still slipping. His eyes locked on hers, flickering with a kind of desperate hope, not because he thought she could save him, but because she'd come anyway. I'm not here for you, Elise said quietly. The doppelganger chuckled, voice warm, easy. Of course you are. I'm all that's left. Elise stepped back. The attic was cold, but not in any physical sense. It was a deeper cold, an internal stillness, like the world was watching her through a keyhole. You're lying, she said. The reflection of Gabriel leaned forward. That's all we've ever done. The lights above her head buzzed once and then dimmed. A sound rose from beneath the floorboards. Not footsteps, not creaking, breathing. As though the house had lungs and it had just realized she was inside again. Elise didn't flinch. She knew better now. The fear wasn't a weapon. It was an invitation. And she'd already accepted it too many times. Instead, she faced the mirror fully. Let me speak to him. The fake Gabriel blinked, then tilted his head considering. Speak to what's left of him, you mean? Now, the reflection went still. Behind the glass, the stitched version of Gabriel slowly raised his head. His mouth was still sewn, the black wire glistening like oil, but his eyes, God, his eyes, were alive, screaming without sound. Pleading, he looked exhausted. His skin sagged. His arms trembled, barely able to keep him upright in the chair. She placed her fingers on the glass again, whispered his name, and in that instant, the attic around her shifted. The walls grew longer, the ceiling rose, shadows stretched. The attic became the gate. The mirror pulsed, and Elise fell through, not with motion, with existence. Her vision warped, twisted inward, and when it snapped back into focus, she stood on the other side of the mirror, in his world, a place that felt like memory viewed through water. Everything bent wrong. The chair creaked behind her. The air buzzed like static trapped in an endless loop. This was where Gabriel had been all this time. Gabe, his head turned slowly, his mouth still sewn shut. Elise rushed forward, but something caught her wrist. Not a hand, a chain. Invisible until it tightened. Her arms yanked backward, slammed against the wall. Shackled. A voice rose from the dark corners of the room, ancient and amused. He traded silence for your freedom. But silence doesn't last forever. She turned toward the voice, straining against the chains. You said you'd let him go. The shadows laughed. We said he could go. We didn't say what would be left. The air began to fill with whispers. Hundreds of them. All versions of her name. Elise, 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 like 1,000 people mouthing it underwater. She looked at Gabriel, tears spilling from his stitched eyes, and screamed, "Then take me instead!" Silence. A long pause. Then, gladly. The chains snapped open, but not from kindness, from acceptance. The shadows lunged. She felt them pierce her skin, not like blades, but like memories tearing their way in. Images flashed behind her eyes. Gabriel's life, Gabriel's pain. The moment he chose to stay behind while she fled, and the unbearable grief that followed. And then she saw it. The first mirror. Not the one they had found. The original. Buried in the basement of the house their mother had grown up in. A mirror older than time. A thing crafted not to show reflection, but to feed. Gabriel had found it, not accidentally. He had been searching, because someone had whispered to him, a voice that sounded like their mother's. Bring her to me. The memory burned. Elise cried out. The mirror behind her cracked, and the voice, no longer shadows, no longer mimicry, rose like a tide. You are the last door, Elise. When you break, we step through. The glass exploded, and Elise woke up in the chair. Real? Not real. She didn't know anymore. But the wires were in her mouth, and Gabriel was gone. Only now she was the one left behind, and the mirror was wide open. She couldn't move. Not at first. The chair beneath her was too tight, too molded to her shape, like it had been built not to hold her, but to become her. Her wrists were bound to the armrests with threads finer than hair, yet stronger than steel. They shimmered faintly in the dull, gray light, tension strings humming softly as if plucked by invisible hands. Her breath came shallow, each inhale coated in cold. The wires weren't just around her wrists now, they were in her skin, threaded through her lips. Sewn, not with stitches but with silence. She tried to scream and found that her voice had no exit. The sound dissolved before it could even reach her throat. Her jaw strained, but the threads held. In the mirror before her, she saw herself, the real her, or so she thought, pale, eyes wide, and just beyond comprehension. Someone else watching from inside her reflection. The room around her wasn't a room anymore. It was a membrane. The walls breathed, not in and out, but forward and back, like something on the other side was pressing its face to the surface, trying to get through. There were no corners, no edges, just endless reflection, curving into itself like a glass bubble suspended in dream. Gabriel was nowhere, or maybe he was watching her now, from somewhere deeper. Then the smile came, not hers. Her reflection grinned, a full, slow curl of the mouth that revealed no teeth, only darkness. And when the smile spread, the stitched mouth in the chair began to hurt. Pain radiated up through her cheeks like heat, like her face was being pulled open from the inside. Her reflection leaned closer, only there was no mirror. It simply moved forward, out of the glass, like the boundary between them was imagination. And when it spoke, its voice came not through sound, but vibration, felt in her bones, in her spine. You wore your fear well, Elise. The reflection circled her now. Not walking, just appearing in different places around the room, as if it were shifting from one angle to the next in a slideshow of horror. You fought for him. That's what made you perfect. That's why we chose you. She screamed again, but it came out as nothing. The stitched mouth pulsed. She yanked her arms. The wires dug deeper. The reflection crouched before her now, hands folded delicately in its lap, like it was studying a painting. You think you've resisted. But you've already opened the gate, Elise. That's the part you still don't understand. You are the gate. Behind it, the void began to fill with shadows. Figures stepped forward, not creatures, people, versions of her, some with mouths sewn shut, others smiling too wide. One stood bleeding from her eyes. Another floated, her feet never touching the floor, twitching like a puppet half, controlled. Each one locked eyes with her in the chair, and each one whispered the same word in unison. Though she couldn't hear it, she knew it. Welcome. The mirror world didn't reflect reality anymore. It replaced it, swallowed it, warped it into a new truth. The reflection, her doppelganger, smiled wider and leaned in. You've done your part. Now rest. Her eyes filled with tears. Not because she was scared, but because she could feel it happening. Her thoughts were no longer alone. Something else had begun to speak inside her head. At first, whispers. Then memories, ones she didn't own. Her mother's voice calling from the hall. Gabriel's laughter from their childhood. A lullaby that made her ache. Then came new memories, ones she never lived. Running through a forest at night, deeing in a church, staring into a mirror until her eyes bled. The versions of her began to bleed together. Reality blurred, thin, like a knife drawn across paper. The sound of scissors echoed behind her. Sharp, clean, one stitch snapped, she gasped. Air returned, pain followed. But the moment was hers. She spoke one word. Gabriel. The mirror rippled. Everything froze. The doppelganger turned suddenly, eyes narrowing. The stitched versions of her in the background jerked, like marionettes whose strings had been cut. One collapsed. Another blinked. And through the center of the room, the air split. A tear, a literal tear in the glass world, jagged and pulsing. Through it stepped someone, not Gabriel, not yet, but him, the real him, bloodied, broken, but whole. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The moment Elise saw his eyes, tired, weathered human, she began to fight. The stitches screamed. Her wrists bled, but she pulled. The reflection roared. A noise that wasn't sound, but the death of silence itself. Gabriel rushed forward, reached out. His hand burned the moment it touched her. The light around them erupted. The versions of Elise began to shatter, each one screaming in a different voice, each one clawing at the tear in space to flee. But they were trapped in her, and she was no longer staying. With one final scream, she tore free. The chair broke, the thread snapped, and the mirror world collapsed. Elise fell. Gabriel caught her, and together, they tumbled through the rip in the air. Out, away, back toward something that might be real. The last thing Elise saw before everything went white was her reflection, standing alone, still smiling, and whispering, "There's always another mirror." They landed hard, too hard for a dream, too soft for reality. Elise hit the floor with a thud that reverberated in her teeth. Gabriel just behind her, his breathing shallow, ragged. The world around them was still forming, folding in like lungs that hadn't breathed in years. Everything was blurred at the edges, walls without corners, ceilings that shimmered as though underwater, and a dull blue light that seemed to come from nowhere at all. She coughed, hands pressed to the cool stone floor. Her palms were scraped raw. Gabriel groaned beside her, one arm cradling his ribs. He looked worse than she remembered, drawn, cracked, as if some parts of him had started to forget how to hold shape. But his eyes were his, still his. "Is it real?" she asked, voice hoarse, trembling. Gabriel lifted his head, squinting at the shifting space around them. Not quite. The room was massive, far too large to exist in the house they'd grown up in. It stretched in every direction without symmetry, like someone had started building a cathedral but stopped halfway through each corridor, as if even architecture had been swallowed by confusion. The walls were mirrors, but not reflective. They shimmered darkly, absorbing light instead of bouncing it back. Every so often, a ripple would pass through them, like a breath behind black glass. "This isn't the mirror world," Gabriel said, struggling to sit upright. "This is the between." Elise stared at him. Between what? He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw the weight in his face. Not just fear. Not just exhaustion. He'd seen too much, between us and them. She didn't ask who they were. She already knew. A sudden hum filled the air, deep and low, like a cello string being plucked somewhere beneath their feet. The ground trembled. The blue light began to flicker, pulsing in slow rhythm with the sound. With it came a warmth that didn't comfort, it coaxed. Gabriel winced. "They know we're here. How do we leave?" His silence answered her. "You don't know," she whispered. "I knew how to get in. I never knew how to get out." A beat passed between them, too much. Too fast, too loud. And then footsteps, not near, not far, but many. They came from the walls, from the shadows, from behind doors that hadn't existed moments before. Soft, deliberate, in sync. Elise rose to her feet, every part of her body screaming in protest. "We can't just stay here." Gabriel nodded. "We won't. We find the anchor. We find the original point. You said this wasn't the mirror world." "It's not," he said. "But they're in here, too. What we destroyed, what we fought, it wasn't the core. It was a sliver." She froze. "Then what is the core?" The hum deepened. Gabriel didn't look at her. He looked toward the center of the room. A single pedestal had emerged from the ground, smooth, black stone, humming like it carried a heartbeat. Upon it sat a mirror, not a large one, not ornate, just a hand mirror, old and silver-framed, the glass dulled with time. Something about it made Elise's knees go weak. "That," Gabriel said, "was our mother's." Elise swallowed. "No. That was buried with her." "No," Gabriel whispered. "She was buried with it. It was never meant to be in the ground. It was meant to be fed." The hum grew teeth. A screech laced underneath it, high, pitched, like metal being peeled open. The shadows on the far end of the room started to shift, and from them, figures began to form. People. No, not people. Copies. One had Gabriel's face, but wrong, too smooth, too bright. Another wore Elise's body, but too tall, too graceful, and smiling too soon. Dozens now, all forming from the walls, all walking toward them. Each step in sync. Elise stepped back. "We need to destroy it." "The mirror." She nodded. Gabriel hesitated. "If we do, I don't know what happens to us. They're already replacing us, Gabriel." The copies drew closer. One stopped to kneel, dragging its fingers across the ground, leaving behind a trail of glass shards that seemed to grow from the floor. Elise didn't wait. She ran, straight toward the pedestal. The moment she touched the mirror, the entire room screamed. Not the copies, not Gabriel. The room. As if the air itself were tearing apart at the seams. The glass in her hands vibrated like it was alive. The metal edges seared her palms. But she didn't let go. She lifted the mirror over her head and, with every ounce of rage, grief, and fear, slammed it against the pedestal. It didn't break. Instead, it sank into the stone, like water, and the pedestal cracked down the middle. The copies stopped moving. Gabriel stepped forward, breathing hard. "Elise," she turned, and saw herself, a true reflection, not in the mirror, in the space around her. For a moment, everything was clear. She was back in the attic. Gabriel stood across from her. No mirror, no monsters, just them, breathing, alive. But then, a laugh, not hers, not his. "Ah, child, soft," echoing from behind the wall, then another, and another, dozens, hundreds. The mirror was gone, but the laughter remained. And they realized that wasn't the core. It was only a key. The laughter didn't stop. It echoed through the attic like it belonged to the wood itself, woven into the beams, the insulation, the forgotten dust of a house that had been silent too long. At first, it sounded like children, playful, familiar. Elise flinched. Not because of the pitch, but because she recognized it. One voice in particular. It was her own, younger, from a time she could barely remember. She and Gabriel stood frozen, backs pressed together. The attic was dim again, gray morning leaking through the slats of the boarded-up window. The pedestal was gone, the mirror gone. No trace of the between world remained, and yet everything felt wrong, off kilter. Like the house was tilted at an angle they couldn't see, but could feel in their bones. Gabriel whispered, "They're not in the mirror anymore." Elise nodded slowly, her eyes wide, scanning the space. "They're in here." The laughter turned to whispers, soft, ticking at the edges of speech, like a chorus of broken clocks trying to speak. "Come find us." Elise turned to the wall. That voice, her voice, had come from inside it. "Come find us." "Elise, we're hiding." The drywall pulsed. Gabriel stepped in front of her, shielding her. "We need to leave this room." But when he reached for the attic door, it was gone. Not closed, not blocked. Gone. The walls behind them were smooth now, seamless, no trapdoor, no hinges, as if the house had never needed entrances in the first place. Only exits. The whispers multiplied. They came from below, from above, from inside the floor. The house wasn't holding them anymore. It was becoming them. Gabriel backed away from the blank wall, fists clenched. "This place isn't what it was." "No," Elise whispered. "It's awake." The boards over the window peeled away on their own, curling like paper in firelight. Light spilled in, but not daylight, not sunlight. A flickering blue glow, like the one from the between room, like the one from the mirror. Elise stepped forward cautiously, peering out the opening, and the breath caught in her throat. There was no street, no yard, no trees, no town. Only space. Endless, cracked glass terrain stretching in every direction, stitched together by pieces of memory. Half-built rooms, floating doors, playgrounds rotting in the sky, staircases leading into fog. And in the sky above it all, a giant eye stared downward. Open, unblinking, reflecting everything, and nothing. Gabriel joined her at the window. His voice was hollow. "We're inside it now." Elise turned to him, her mouth dry. "Inside what?" "The memory it made of us." She looked out again. The structures down below weren't just random. They were familiar. The twisted silhouette of their childhood home. The elementary school she hadn't thought of in years. The burned-down theater their mother used to take them to on weekends. Places they'd forgotten. Places they feared. It had collected them, rebuilt them. A twisted museum curated by a thing that had never lived, only watched. The laughter grew louder again. Closer. Gabriel grabbed her hand. "We have to move." "But where?" "Anywhere but here." He yanked her from the window, and suddenly the wall folded open before them. Not like a door, like an eyelid, revealing a staircase that descended into what looked like a hallway. But the hallway had no end, no ceiling. Just more walls of breathing plaster and warped photos hanging crooked. She followed without arguing. The steps below them pulsed like flesh. Every footfall felt like pressing into a heartbeat. As they descended, the walls shifted. Photographs changed. Each picture they passed showed them, Elise and Gabriel, as children, then teens, then adults, then others. Twisted versions, some laughing too hard, some not blinking. One frame showed Elise asleep in bed. The next showed her watching herself sleep. She looked away, bile rising in her throat. "Where are we going?" she asked. Gabriel's voice was taut. "There has to be a central room. A nest. If we can reach it, maybe we can tear it out from the root." They reached the base of the stairs and entered a living room. Their living room, from when they were 12. Everything was as it had been. The played couch, the dusty bookshelves, the fraying carpet, even the smell, lemon cleaner and old wood, and on the TV a VHS flickering, static, thin, home video footage. Their father, long dead, smiling into the camera. "Elise," he said, "come closer." She backed away instinctively. Gabriel stepped forward. "Don't look at it." The image on the screen morphed. Their father's smile widened too far. His teeth grew. The footage began to twitch, replaying the same second over and over, him blinking once. Then again, faster, until the TV screamed. Not a sound, a scream. The glass cracked. Elise yanked Gabriel away as a figure began to crawl out of the screen. A hand too long, a face all wrong. It wasn't their father. It was what had watched him. They fled down the hallway that opened beside the bookshelf. The laughter followed them now. The house shifted behind them. Rooms moved. Doors appeared, then vanished. A hallway swallowed itself. A kitchen became a basement, became a bedroom, became a graveyard, all in seconds. Time shattered. Reality hiccuped. Elise screamed Gabriel's name, but his voice echoed from behind her. Then ahead, then beside her. She turned in circles. Walls breathed. Pictures wept. One mirror screamed her mother's lullaby in reverse. She dropped to her knees, clutching her ears, sobbing. Until a light, warm, not blue, real, it came from under a door she knew, their childhood bedroom. She crawled toward it, gasping, opened it, and found Gabriel inside. Not the twisted one, not a copy, the real him, wounded, but whole. He held something in his hands, a shard. Mirror glass, glowing faintly. He looked up at her. "It's not the house," he said. "It's us." Elise stepped into the room and felt the world shift beneath her, not in space but in certainty. Her muscles tensed involuntarily, her stomach clenching, like she'd just stepped off the edge of something invisible. The light in the room was soft, sunlight through gauze, yet it didn't seem to come from any source. The walls were bare except for one thing, a single, large mirror bolted to the far side, cracked clean through the middle. Gabriel sat cross-legged on the floor, cradling a shard of glass in his hands as if it were a sacred relic. He looked up slowly, eyes dim but lucid, like a man just beginning to wake from a long, bitter coma. There were no copies in sight, no twisted laughter, no flickering images of the past clawing at the corners of her vision. Just silence, stillness, and the weight of truth pressing down on the space like a held breath. "It was never the house," he said again, voice low, almost reverent. "It's not even the mirrors." Elise closed the door behind her, slowly, her heart pounding. "Then what is it?" Gabriel held up the shard between two fingers, the edge catching that strange source, less light. "It's us, pieces of us, every fear we left unresolved, every thought we buried, every version of ourselves we tried to forget." They watched, they learned, and then they began to build. Her chest tightened. Build what? He turned to the cracked mirror on the wall. This. The moment she looked into it, Elise understood. Not because she saw herself, but because she didn't. The reflection didn't show the room. It didn't show Gabriel. It didn't show her. It showed a vast, black expanse, a tunnel without end, crawling with shapes that had no names. Eyes blinked open and shut across a flat plane that pulsed like skin. Whispers scrawled across the surface like ink in water, vanishing as soon as they formed. Some of the voices she recognized. Her own. Gabriel's. Her mother's. Then new ones. Future ones. Ones she hadn't spoken yet but would. Her hands started to tremble. "Why would it show this?" she whispered. Gabriel stood, the shard clutched tightly now. "Because this is what it feeds on. Not the surface. Not the moment you look into the mirror, but what comes after. The echo. The self that looks back and sees something almost familiar, but not quite. That moment when you ask, is that still me? That's when it starts." Elise turned away from the mirror, the back of her throat burning. "How do we stop it?" Gabriel didn't speak right away. When he did, his voice broke. "We don't." She stared at him. "No, there's always a way. This isn't a monster you kill. Elise. It's not a ghost. It's not even a curse. It's a reflection that got tired of waiting. Every time someone looked into it and hated what they saw, it grew stronger. Every child who stared into the glass and flinched. Every adult who questioned whether the thing staring back was really them. All of it. It collected those doubts like blood in a bowl. He stepped closer to the mirror, and the crack widened. "They're not coming into our world," he said. "They're just inviting us into theirs." Elise shook her head, backing away from the wall. "Then we have to resist. We can't let it take more. We can't be its next copy." Gabriel looked down at the shard, then at her. "You don't understand, we already are." And suddenly Elise saw it, really saw it. The flicker behind Gabriel's eyes, the way his movements lagged by a breath, the hesitation in his voice, not out of confusion, but because something else was listening. A chill swept down her spine. "You're not him." He blinked and smiled, not cruelly, not wide, just wrong. "Not completely," he whispered. Elise stumbled backward, heart in her throat. The door behind her was gone. The room had sealed. Trapped. Gabriel held the shard of mirror up, and the reflection inside began to form again. Not a tunnel, not a world, but a version of her, one she hadn't seen yet. This Elise had no eyes, just empty sockets, but she was smiling. The real Gabriel, the last real part, spoke from somewhere inside the copy's throat. "I tried to hold them back. I did. But you opened the gate. Elise, when you came back for me, you brought the crack with you." "No," she breathed. "I'm sorry." The mirror behind him shattered into a million spinning fragments. The copy lunged, but Elise was ready. She dropped low, sweeping the leg, not of a monster, not of a demon, but of a man just slightly too late to be saved. He hit the ground hard, and the mirror shard skittered across the floor. Elise dove, grabbed it, spun, held it up, not to Gabriel, to herself, and she stared into it without blinking, without flinching, without fear. The image rippled. Multiple versions tried to form. The blind one, the stitched mouth one, the floating, smiling one. All collapsed, all dissolved, because she saw herself, just herself. And for the first time since this all began, the mirror didn't take. It returned. The door behind her slammed open. Real light poured in. The world outside, gray, broken, warped, but there. Elise turned back to Gabriel. He lay still, breathing. One eye flickered with recognition. The other, not yet. She offered her hand. "Let's go." He took it, and the room dissolved behind them like fog under heat. But as they walked back into the hall, back into the house that was still folding, creaking, waiting, a single shard of glass sat on the floor where the mirror had been. It pulsed once, like a heartbeat. They stepped into a hallway that hadn't been there minutes before, or maybe it had, buried behind layers of false doors and shifting walls. The moment Elise crossed the threshold, she felt the pressure return, the kind that curled in the ears and made the bones feel like they'd been soaked in cold water. Gabriel limped beside her, one arm slung around her shoulder. He was lighter now, like parts of him had been hollowed out and forgotten somewhere in the mirror's shadow, but he was still breathing, still here. For now, the hallway was long, too long. At first glance it looked like the upstairs hall of their childhood home, but every step stretched it further, like a rubber band pulled taut. The lights flickered above them, swinging even though there was no breeze. The wallpaper bled faintly in the corners, tiny threads of ink running down toward the floorboards, spelling out names they didn't recognize. Elise tried not to look too closely. Not at the names. Not at the pictures lining the walls, which twisted just out of sight. If she glanced too quickly, she saw her face in some of them. Sometimes Gabriel's. Once or twice, their mother's. Frozen in a moment she didn't recall, smiling too hard, standing beside people who'd never existed. Gabriel broke the silence. "We're getting close." "To what?" she asked, voice low. "The heart," he said. "Or maybe the wound." She didn't ask how he knew. It wasn't knowledge. It was weight. The air thickened with each step. The walls seemed to lean in just a little more. The sounds grew quieter, like they were walking deeper into the chest of something that was learning how to breathe. After what felt like hours, or minutes stretched too thin, they reached the end of the hall. A single door stood there, old and peeling, its wood swollen with age. The brass knob was tarnished black, and carved into the surface were hundreds of fingernail scratches. They radiated from the handle outward, desperate, as if someone, or something, had tried to claw its way back out. Elise placed her hand on the knob. Gabriel grabbed her wrist. "There's no turning back," he whispered. "I know." She opened it. What lay beyond wasn't a room. It was a memory, but not hers. They stood on the edge of a landscape made of fractured time. An open void littered with floating chunks of the past, each suspended in stillness. A dinner table, a hospital bed, a playground coated in ash, all of it hung motionless, surrounded by darkness so vast it made the air itself feel like it was caving inward. Gabriel pointed to a structure in the distance. A tower, cobbled together from pieces of the house, the school, the mirror rooms. It rose crookedly into a sky that pulsed like a dying star. A heartbeat echoed from it. Steady, rhythmic, wrong, that's where it began, he said. They walked. Time didn't pass normally here. Sometimes their footsteps echoed long after they stopped moving. Other times they'd glance at each other and find their shadows missing, then flickering back. Once, Elise looked down and saw footprints behind them that didn't match either of theirs. They ignored them. They had to. The tower grew with each step, too fast. Its doors were open by the time they reached it, gaping like a mouth ready to bite. Inside, it was silent. No whispers. No laughter, just memory. Elise stepped forward and froze. The walls were covered in pages, loose leaf photos. All of her. Every memory she'd ever repressed. Every ugly moment. Every thought she'd sworn she'd never say aloud. Her shame was written on the walls in crayon. In blood, in burnt paper. Gabriel's side of the room mirrored it. Letters from their father. Old test papers. Hospital discharge notes. A single photo of him standing alone in a mirror store, aged 10, eyes blank. They'd been feeding this thing long before they ever knew it existed. Suddenly, the door slammed behind them. A voice rose from above. Calm, cold, you came back. Elise turned slowly. A figure stood on the far end of the tower's central chamber, wrapped in mirrors. Not armor. Skin. Panels of glass fused together, moving like flesh, each one flickering with a version of Elise or Gabriel or someone almost like them. Its face was a perfect oval of silver, smooth and completely still. Gabriel stepped between it and Elise. We ended you. The figure tilted its head. You gave us more. You tore the boundary. You showed us grief. Elise raised the shard in her pocket, still warm, pulsing faintly. The creature paused. You still think that hurts us? It said, almost curious. No, Elise whispered. But it remembers me. And before the mirror, being could speak again, Elise threw the shard at its chest. The impact didn't pierce. It reflected. The mirror, being reeled, a flicker of pain rippling through its face. The image on its surface twisted, briefly showing not Elise, not Gabriel, but a room filled with others just like them. Copies. Trapped. Waiting. Elise ran forward, grabbed another shard from the floor. One of the walls had started to crack, and slammed it into the mirror, being side. It screamed, but not in sound. In memories, they poured out of it. A girl being told she was too much. A boy locked in a closet by a voice he trusted. A woman walking into a room and forgetting why she ever loved her own reflection. It wasn't just Elise and Gabriel. It had been collecting everyone, for years, for lifetimes, and now it was full, too full. The tower began to shake. Cracks raced through the walls. Light poured in, not cold, not blue but real, warm, painful. Gabriel shouted Elise, "We have to finish it, now!" She turned to him, breathless. "How?" He looked at her, eyes wide, desperate, and then he said it. "Give it what it can't take." Her eyes widened. She understood. She stepped forward, faced the mirror being, and smiled. A real smile, not of joy, of acceptance, of truth. And for the first time, the being hesitated, its glass surface fractured. Because Elise didn't hate what she saw anymore. She owned it. The tower exploded with light, and then silence. Silence didn't mean peace. Elise opened her eyes to a world turned to ash. The tower was gone, obliterated in a flash that left no rubble, no smoke, just absence. She stood in what felt like the afterimage of something that had been too immense to understand, too ancient to name. The ground beneath her feet was smooth, like polished obsidian, and the sky above was an endless gray canvas. No sun, no stars, just the suggestion of a ceiling too far to touch. She turned slowly. Gabriel wasn't beside her. Panic stabbed at her chest. Her voice cracked as she called out his name, and for a moment, only the echo answered. Too sharp, too immediate, like it had been waiting for her to speak. Then, faintly, from behind her, footsteps. She spun around, her heart lodged in her throat. Gabriel emerged from the haze, limping slightly, one arm pressed against his ribs. But it was him. Whole, real, breathing. Relief washed over her like fire. You're here. He gave a small nod, his expression unreadable. You did it. We did. They stood in silence for a moment. No laughter, no shadows, no wrong reflections, just stillness. But the feeling didn't last. Because beneath her relief, Elise felt something else missing. She scanned the space again. Too empty. Too clean, like a stage set waiting for the actors to return. She touched her wrist, her neck. No wires, no blood. But no warmth either. The light that had exploded from the tower, the same one that had seemed so real, was gone now. Not faded. Removed. Gabriel walked a few steps away, eyes fixed on something in the distance. Elise followed his gaze. Far ahead, barely visible in the gloom, was a door. Just one. Freestanding, untouched, with no walls to hold it. It's not over, Gabriel said softly. No, she replied. It never was. They approached the door slowly. With every step, Elise felt her memories tug at her, some kind, others jagged, all of them unfinished. The hallway, the stitched mouths, her reflection laughing, her mother's lullaby echoing in reverse. Each one rose from beneath her skin like steam. And then, as they neared, she heard a sound that stopped her cold. A knock. From behind the door. 3 gentle raps. Then silence. Then, Elise, her mother's voice. Soft, warm, alive. Elise's breath caught. Did you hear that? Gabriel nodded slowly, but didn't meet her eyes. It's not her. How do you know? He looked at the door. Because the knocking continued, but the voice changed. Now it was his voice, calling her name. Then it was her own, whispering from the other side. Elise's, open up, it's okay now. The door rattled. A single flicker of light shone underneath. Not blue, not warm. White flat. Dead. Gabriel placed his hand on her shoulder. This is the last test. What is? Belief, he said. They don't need mirrors anymore. They've been watching from inside us, waiting to see what we'll trust, what will follow. She stepped closer to the door. The knob was old brass, worn smooth from imagined hands. The wood no longer looked like wood. It pulsed slightly, like skin. She reached for the handle, then stopped, and looked down. At her shadow. It wasn't hers. It didn't match. The shape was taller. The head too wide. The arms too long. Its fingers moved before she did. She stepped back. The shadow didn't. It held out its hand. And behind the door, her voice pleaded again. Elise, you can come in. It's safe. We're all waiting. She looked at Gabriel. His eyes were on the shadow now. I think this is what they really are, he said. Not monsters. Not ghosts. Choices. Bad ones. Old ones. The parts of us we leave behind when we lie to ourselves. The shadow moved again, this time curling its fingers in invitation. Elise closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, she smiled. Not with joy, not even with peace, but with resolve. No, she turned away from the door, from the voice, from the copy of herself that waited just beyond it. The shadow twitched, screeched, and then it crumbled. Dust. Light exploded outward once more, but this time it came from within. From Elise. The space around them trembled. The gray sky shattered like glass, and above them, through the cracks, was the world. The real world. Gabriel grabbed her hand. Go. They ran. The light pulled them upward, until the void peeled away and the air rushed back in and they fell. Onto the wooden floor of the attic. Real. Dusty. Dark. Elise gasped, heart pounding. Gabriel lay beside her, coughing, but grinning. The mirror gone. The room? Still. Then the attic door creaked open, sunlight filtering through. Voices called from downstairs. Real ones. People searching for them. They were back. But Elise didn't smile. Because as she helped Gabriel to his feet, and they stumbled out of the attic, she looked back one last time, and saw it. On the far wall, a sliver, a hairline crack in the paint, tiny, unmoving, but there, waiting. Days passed, or at least that's what the world insisted. Elise watched clocks tick, listened to radios hum, walked through rooms filled with sunlight and laughter and noise. Things that had once felt distant, unreachable. The air outside smelled like rain again. The grass was real. The sky didn't flicker. Everything functioned exactly the way it should have. But in the quiet moments, in the inn, between silences when no one else was around, something lingered. She saw it first while brushing her teeth. A glimpse in the bathroom mirror, her reflection blinking slightly out of sync. Just once. A flicker, so quick it could have been dismissed. But she didn't dismiss it. She never dismissed it anymore. The house had been cleaned, the attic sealed. Gabriel slept in the guest room now, refusing to return home, and she understood. He carried it too, the weight of something they'd barely survive, something neither of them could explain in any way that wouldn't sound like madness. The people who found them. Cops, neighbors, even old family friends, had all asked the same question, where did you go? And they'd told the same lie, we got lost. It was easier than the truth, that they had been somewhere beneath memory, somewhere stitched together from fear. But now that they were home, the lie didn't fit the way it should have. Because Elise could still feel it, not in dreams, not in nightmares, in waking life. In the smell of burning wires when she turned on the attic light. In the sudden chill in the hallway after dusk. In the way mirrors sometimes fogged when no one had used the sink. And then there was the crack. It had appeared on the fourth day. Tiny, almost charming. On the far wall of the living room, just beneath the crown molding. Elise had stared at it for a long time, trying to remember if it had always been there. Had the house settled? Had the weather changed the drywall? But the crack didn't act like a crack. It didn't grow. It didn't spread. It breathed. Barely. In and out. Like something behind the wall was watching, timing itself to her heartbeat. She didn't tell Gabriel. Not yet. He was just beginning to sleep through the night again. So she watched it. Every day. In silence. Until the seventh night. She woke to the sound of footsteps. Not Gabriel's. He walked heavy, uneven, still favoring the injury in his ribs. These steps were soft. Careful. Elise sat up in bed, heart pounding. The hallway outside her door was dark. No moonlight filtered in. Just a flat absence of color, as though the darkness had weight. She listened. The footsteps stopped. Then a whisper. Elise, her stomach twisted. It wasn't Gabriel's voice. It was hers. She stood slowly. Reached for the bat she'd placed beside her nightstand days ago, just in case, and crept to the door. She opened it a crack. Nothing but hallway. The same pictures on the wall. The same rug with the frayed corner. But the whisper came again. Elise, it's me. She followed it. Not because she believed it, but because something inside her did, down the stairs. Into the living room. Where the crack had grown. It was wider now. No longer a line, a fissure, and from within it, light, faint, pale, flickering, the color of memory. She approached slowly, bat in hand, and then something moved behind the wall. Not a figure, not a shape, just a smile, pressed to the crack from inside, too wide, too still. her own. Elise stepped back. The smile didn't follow, but it stayed. Watching, she ran to Gabriel's room, pounded on the door. He opened it, blinking sleep from his eyes, shirt damp with sweat. Elise, what is it? She didn't answer, just pulled him. Down the hall, down the stairs. To the crack, he stared, and for a long moment said nothing. Then it's not done with us. She turned to him, voice breaking. I thought we beat it. You don't beat something like that, he said. You survive it, and if you're lucky you forget. But we didn't forget. He nodded. That's why it came back. The smile behind the wall twitched, and then came a new sound. A knocking, slow, measured, from inside the crack. Like knuckles against glass, Elise dropped the bat. Because she realized the sound wasn't a warning. It was an invitation, a way back in. And they had a choice to make. They could pretend again. Live their lives. Let the crack grow until it swallowed the whole house. Or they could go back in, not to fight, not to win, but to understand. Gabriel said it before she could. If we don't face it, someone else will. She looked at him. At the crack, at her own reflection smiling from inside it, and nodded. They had walked through mirrors, survived stitched mouths, outrun memories that wanted to replace them. They'd returned. But the door never closed behind them. It waited, and now they would open it again. The crack widened without noise, no splintering, no shriek of bending wood or tearing drywall. It simply parted, like flesh surrendering beneath a scalpel, exposing a darkness that wasn't hollow but full. Full of pressure, of memory, of waiting. Elise stood at the threshold, her breath shallow, her heart hammering out a rhythm that no longer belonged to her alone. Beside her, Gabriel exhaled once and stepped forward without hesitation. She followed. Crossing into the crack wasn't like stepping through a doorway. It was like being swallowed. The moment they passed through, the house behind them blinked out of existence. Not faded, not transitioned. Gone. In its place, the familiar numb grayness returned. But this time, it didn't pretend to be a world. It made no effort to mimic or confuse. It was bare. A landscape stripped to its bones, a void made for two things then, and what was left of the mirror's hunger. No corridors greeted them this time, no mirrors, no illusions. Just an open space, flat and endless, with a sky that pulsed as if it were a single living eye, half-lidded and disinterested. Gabriel whispered, "It's quieter." Elise nodded. "Because it doesn't need to trick us anymore." They walked. The ground beneath them was no longer solid. It rippled faintly underfoot, like walking on thick, stretched fabric, and beneath that fabric movement. Shapes brushing against the underside, pacing with them, not threatening, just present, watching. In the distance, something rose, a structure, towering, black, made entirely of broken reflections, stacked on each other like shards of a shattered cathedral. It flickered not with light, but with memory. Every panel played moments from their lives, but not the lives they remembered. These were alternatives. Elise saw herself laughing with their mother at age 15, a moment that had never happened. Gabriel saw their father alive at Christmas, handing him a wrapped gift with a smile Gabriel had never known. This wasn't temptation, it was cruelty. The tower loomed larger the closer they came. It didn't shimmer. It didn't lure. It simply waited. And as they drew near, the pressure in the air thickened. The taste of iron crept into Elise's mouth. Her skin tingled, as if static electricity danced just beneath it. Gabriel's breathing grew shallow. He placed a hand on the base of the tower, and it rippled under his touch. A doorway appeared. No grand entrance. No fanfare. Just a thin slit in the glass, tall and jagged, wide enough for a person to walk through if they didn't mind being cut. They entered anyway. Inside, the tower defied logic. They stepped into a library, but not of books, of selves. Rows upon rows of mirrors stood stacked like tombstones, each reflecting a different version of the person who looked into them. Elise paused at one that showed her smiling, pregnant, older, hair longer. Behind her, a man she'd never met held her hand. A life unlived. A person she might have been. Gabriel stopped at one where he was a child again, younger than she remembered him ever being, his face dirt, smudged and wide-eyed, kneeling beside something small, an animal, maybe, or a grave. The mirrors whispered. Not aloud. In thoughts. In doubts. Do you miss who you could have been? Did you make the right choice? Would they have loved you if you were different? Elise turned from them, nausea rising. They're not traps, Gabriel murmured. They're anchors. The versions of us it holds on to, so it can keep growing. How do we break them? Gabriel didn't answer, because he didn't know. Suddenly, a new mirror appeared, floating, moving toward them, slow as a hunter. It was taller than the others, wide, polished so cleanly that Elise didn't see herself at all, only the space behind her. Then, it moved. The reflection shifted without her moving. Her double stepped forward in the mirror. Same clothes, same posture, but the eye is black, empty. The reflection reached out, not in the glass, out of it. A hand burst through the surface with a sound like a scream underwater. Elise stumbled back. Gabriel shouted, yanking her away just in time as the mirror cracked and collapsed inward, dragging its own reflection into a hole that hadn't existed seconds before. The glass hissed, and then hundreds of mirrors began to ripple. The library woke up. Every reflection in every pane started to move, their faces twitching, mouths opening in soundless screams. One version of Gabriel ripped its own face off. Another Elise hung from invisible strings like a marionette. Then they began to climb out. The room convulsed. The space that once resembled a place of memory became a womb of replication, birthing copy after copy after copy, failed, rotting. Distorted versions of them, pouring onto the glass floor like water spilling from broken bowls. Gabriel grabbed Elise's hand. We can't fight this. We have to end it from the center. What is the center? He looked at her. And this time, he did know. You. The copies rushed toward them. And Elise understood. They weren't chasing them. They were chasing her. Because Elise had done something the others hadn't. She'd smiled. She'd accepted herself. And the being, whatever had lived beneath the mirrors, couldn't consume that. It could reflect it, mimic it, but it couldn't digest truth, because truth didn't crack. It didn't bend. It didn't feed the thing. She stopped running. Gabriel turned, confused, but Elise held his arm. No more mirrors. She stood tall, looked at the copies, and closed her eyes. The world didn't need her reflection. It needed her, whole, unafraid, unaided. And as she stood in stillness, heart pounding but face calm, the copies slowed. Their movements staggered. One by one, they began to disintegrate, not explode, not vanish. They simply stopped, like shadows pulled away at dawn. The mirrors dimmed. The tower creaked, and from deep within its core, something screamed. But Elise didn't move. She kept her eyes closed, kept her heart open, and the scream began to fade, as if the thing inside had finally been seen. Not feared, not fed, just understood. The tower cracked, the mirrors fell. Light poured in, and everything ended. The fall wasn't sudden. It was slow, like floating through molasses, time stretching thin, sound peeling away layer by layer, until Elise couldn't even hear her own breath. She wasn't sure when her feet left the floor of the mirror tower. One moment, she was standing among collapsing glass and unraveling copies of herself. The next, she was drifting through weightless space, wrapped in a silence so complete it felt alive. There was no sky, no walls, just a vast whiteness, endless and absolute, as though she'd slipped between the frames of reality and fallen into something that came before light. Somewhere behind her, or maybe beside her, or perhaps not anywhere physical at all, Gabriel floated too, motionless. His body curled inward slightly, as if asleep or trying to shield himself from something. His hair moved slowly in the invisible current, his eyes closed. She reached for him, but her hand didn't move. Her limbs responded like they were underwater, slow and delayed. The white around her didn't glow. It just was. And in its emptiness, it carried weight. Her mind drifted, not with thought, but memory. She saw flashes. Her mother's face in the hospital waiting room, quietly crying with her back turned. Gabriel as a boy, alone in the basement, reading by flashlight after their father had locked the door. The day she skipped school and spent 5 hours walking the city in silence because she couldn't face herself in a mirror anymore. Moments. Tiny, unspoken truths, regrets. Small wounds that festered when no one watched. They didn't play out like visions. They pressed against her, suffocating her with their intimacy. The mirror world hadn't created these things. It had waited for them, grown from them. Her reflection wasn't a monster. It was a message. The whiteness began to shift, not a color, not a sound, but a feeling, like something old had just noticed her again. A ripple echoed outward from below, spreading in perfect circles. Elise blinked. There was a floor, a surface just beneath her feet now, hard and impossibly smooth. She stood on it without remembering the moment her body fell into gravity again. Across from her, Gabriel, awake, eyes open. Watching, I thought it was gone, he said softly. Elise's voice came out hoarse. It was never gone. It just changed. He nodded once, slow. Then what is this place? She looked around. The part it couldn't touch. He frowned. What do you mean? I mean, we saw it all, right? The horrors, the copies, the twisted echoes of who we might have been. But this isn't horror. This is quiet. And that was when the first tear in the white appeared. It wasn't violent. It didn't rip. It peeled delicately, like skin slipping away from old fabric. A line of shadow leaked through, not darkness, but contrast, the kind of black that only exists to show where light fails to reach. Through the tear, a voice hummed. Not a song, a tone. Low, steady, neither comforting nor threatening. It sounded human. Elise stepped toward it. Gabriel grabbed her arm. Elise, don't. She looked at him. No more running. She stepped through. The whiteness vanished, replaced by a small, quiet room. Plain, unremarkable. A single mirror stood on the far wall. Elise recognized it instantly. The first one, from the antique shop, cracked, dusty, harmless. She approached it slowly. No movement within. No flicker of wrongness. Just her, hair disheveled, skin pale. But her, the real her. She reached up, touched the glass. It was cold. Not unnaturally, just normally. Like glass should be. Behind her, the room didn't change. Nothing lunged. No reflections moved out of sync. And for the first time, Elise felt free. Not safe. Not happy. But freed from the loop. Gabriel stepped in behind her. He looked into the mirror too. For a moment, they stood together, breathing in the stillness. Is it over? He asked. Elise thought for a long time. No, she said finally. But it's quiet. And that means it's listening. He turned to her. Listening. To what we decide to be next. The mirror didn't answer. But neither did it resist. And that silence, that space, was enough. Because maybe this was never about defeating something. Maybe it was about learning to live with the things that watch you from the other side of the glass. The fears, the doubts, the choices you almost made. They weren't gone. They were yours. You just had to stop running from them. And the mirror, it would stay. But this time, it would wait. And Elise, she would be ready. Elise didn't know how long they stood there, facing the mirror. Minutes, hours, maybe days, folded into seconds. But at some point, she noticed the reflection no longer felt oppressive. Just familiar. That was what made it worse. The danger hadn't vanished. It had simply grown quiet, hiding beneath the ordinary like dust under floorboards. The mirror looked harmless again. A trick of calm. A trap reset. Gabriel shifted beside her. His shoulders were tense, but not with fear, uncertainty, as if he was waiting for a punch that never came. Do you think we broke it? He asked. Elise didn't answer immediately. She watched herself blink in the mirror, tilt her head, breathe, perfectly in sync. That was the scariest part. Not the monsters, not the mimicry. It was the truth that no one would ever know the difference if the switch happened again. "No," she finally said. "I think we gave it what it wanted. A way in. And now it doesn't have to scare us to stay." Gabriel turned toward her slowly, brow furrowed. "Then what do we do?" She stepped back from the mirror. "We stop pretending it's not here." They returned to the house later that night, if it was night. The sky above had turned that bruised indigo again, that color that made the stars look painted and the moon feel too close. Their home sat still, lights off, windows dark. From the outside, it looked untouched, like nothing had happened. But as they stepped through the front door, the air inside was different. Denser, the kind of air that held its breath. All the mirrors were gone. Not shattered, not moved, just gone. Even the ones they hadn't touched. Even the ones nailed into place. Elise ran a hand over the empty frame in the hallway where the long mirror had once hung. Gabriel checked the bathroom, the guest room, the kitchen backsplash. Nothing. No glass, no reflections, only wall. "Did you take them down?" Gabriel asked. Elise shook her head. No. They stared at each other. The implications dug in slowly. It had removed itself. No more doorways, no more tricks. Because it didn't need the mirrors anymore. It had found a home in them. That night, sleep came like a fog, heavy and unwanted. Elise lay in bed with the covers pulled to her chin, eyes locked on the ceiling fan above her. It spun slowly, 3 blades, 1 bulb, and in the space between the rotations she heard it click, not from the fan, from her closet. The doorknob rattled, barely, not violently, just a single twitch like a muscle spasm, then silence. Her mouth went dry. She sat up, heart beginning to race. Click, another twitch. She stood. Each step to the closet heavier than the last, gravity pressing down like she was wading through grief. Her hand hovered over the knob. She didn't want to open it, but she also knew she had to, so she did. Inside, nothing. No clothes, no boxes, just a mirror. One she didn't put there. Tall, narrow, and covered in dust. But even under the dust, she could see her shape. The mirror didn't move, didn't flicker, but her reflection was smiling, and she wasn't. "Elise," it whispered, not with sound, with breath. The mirror breathed. She slammed the door and stepped back, her entire body trembling. Gabriel burst in seconds later, eyes wide. "I heard it." "What happened?" She didn't speak, just pointed at the closet. Gabriel opened it slowly. The mirror was gone, just empty space, not even dust on the floor. But they both knew it wasn't a trick. It wasn't a dream. It had followed them back. Not through glass, not through memory, through recognition. It had learned their patterns, learned their faces, learned their thoughts, and now it was patient. They spent the next days trying to return to something normal. Eating, reading, sometimes even laughing. But always with the same tension in the room, like waiting for a phone call from someone you thought had died. On the 5th night, Gabriel found something in the basement. A note, old, crumpled, written in Elise's handwriting, but she'd never written it. It said, "You are not the first. You will not be the last." The mirror is not an object. It's a memory that refuses to forget. Once it sees you, it remembers, and it waits. It always waits. He showed it to her. They sat in silence, the weight of it settling like dust between them. Elise said, "Then what are we supposed to do? Just live like this?" Gabriel stared down at the paper. Maybe that's the point. Maybe that's all anyone's ever done. They both looked around the room then. No mirrors, no reflections, just a space full of shadows that could be anyone. Elise walked to the window and looked at the glass pane. Her reflection stared back. Still, honest, but something behind the eyes twitched. Not fear, not threat, just the reminder. She whispered to it, "I remember you too." And the reflection smiled. A week passed. Then 2. The world didn't end. No blood came pouring from the walls. No broken reflections lunged from the glass. Elise woke up each morning and found the sun still rose, the trees still swayed in the wind, and birds still sang their cruel, cheerful songs. But beneath it all, something had changed, not outside, but within. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It listened. And the longer they went without talking about it, the more Elise felt like they were being studied. Gabriel stopped sleeping in the house. He didn't say why, but Elise didn't need him to. He'd started locking the door to the room he slept in at the neighbor's guest house, then stopped responding to texts after dark. Elise didn't blame him. He'd become quieter each day, like a shadow growing longer as the sun went down. She could still feel him pulling away, even when he was standing right in front of her. One morning, she drove to a local thrift store just to be around people. She thought maybe seeing strangers, touching real things, books, sweaters, picture frames, might tether her to something that didn't feel like it could disappear if she blinked too long. She wandered the aisles until she saw it. A mirror, not the same one, but close, too close. Same frame style, same size, same slight curve along the edge. It was tucked between a box of tangled Christmas lights and a pile of forgotten VHS tapes. Someone had taped a handwritten note to the bottom of the frame. F-R-E, Techie IT. No Refeliton. Elise didn't move. Her feet rooted to the floor like they'd been nailed there. She stared at the glass. It was true. No reflection. The surface was perfectly still, but empty. As though it weren't just failing to reflect, it was refusing to. Her breath hitched. Then a voice behind her, familiar, dry, older. You see it too. She turned. A man stood there, tall and thin, wrapped in a threadbare coat 2 sizes too big. His face looked like it had forgotten how to smile decades ago. But his eyes, they were awake. I've seen your kind before, he said. Elise's pulse jumped. My kind. People the mirror takes a liking to, he replied. They always come here eventually, looking for something to explain the itch under their skin. Who are you? He tapped the side of his head. Someone who looked too long, too deep, and found out mirrors remember better than people do. Elise's throat went dry. So it's real. It's not just me. Oh, it's real, he said. But it doesn't come for everyone. Just the ones who forget who they are. She stared at him, confusion flickering in her voice. I didn't forget. Didn't you? He asked, his gaze locking onto hers. You let it in when you doubted your own reflection. When you stared too long and wondered if you were really the person everyone thought you were. That's how it starts. It doesn't take your face. It waits until you start giving pieces of it away. Elise's hands trembled. How do I stop it? You don't, he said, softly. You carry it, like a scar you can't see. The trick is not letting it rewrite you. She looked back at the mirror, still empty, still waiting. But why me? She asked. Why Gabriel? The man shrugged. Because you were close enough to the edge, and you looked down. He turned to leave, then paused. Whatever you do, don't go back to where it started. What happens if I do? He didn't answer, just walked away. She watched him disappear between aisles and never saw him again. That night, Elise sat in her bedroom, staring at the black screen of her laptop. Her own reflection stared back faintly from the gloss. Not smiling, not mimicking, just watching. She thought of the man's warning, of not going back, and still, her mind gravitated to the house where it had all begun. The mirror store. Abandoned now, burned out, but not forgotten. Elise had dreams again that night, dreams of mirrors forming teeth, of people speaking with her voice, of Gabriel, faceless, standing behind her whispering, "You're not Elise anymore." She woke up in a cold sweat and made her decision. The next morning, she called Gabriel. No answer. She texted, "We need to go back." "I think we're still in it," he replied 3 minutes later. Already there. She stared at the screen for a long time, then grabbed her keys. The town looked normal. Even the sky was kind. But the moment she pulled into the cracked parking lot of the mirror store, everything tilted. The building still stood. Barely. Its windows were boarded up, and weeds had grown so tall they looked like brittle claws reaching for the sky. Elise stepped out of the car and instantly felt it. The air didn't move here. It waited. She found Gabriel by the front entrance. He looked older, not just tired, aged. Something had stolen time from him. He didn't smile when he saw her. "Can you feel it?" he asked. She nodded. "I think," he said. "We never really got out. I think this is just another room in the tower. One that looks like the world we left." Elise's stomach turned. He pointed at the store. "That door. It didn't exist last week. I drove by. Nothing was here. But now, it was wide open. Inside, darkness pressed like a heartbeat. No lights. No sound. No time." She looked at Gabriel. And without needing to say anything more, they stepped inside. They crossed the threshold together. No hesitation. No spoken plan. Just a shared, quiet understanding. Whatever was waiting inside had always been waiting. The second Elise stepped into the husk of the old mirror shop, the temperature dropped like a hand pressing cold fingers to the back of her neck. The air was stale but not still. It shifted in rhythm, like breath rising and falling through unseen lungs. Dust coated the shelves. Shattered frames lay broken across the warped floorboards. But the mirrors themselves, those were untouched. They were back. Dozens of them. Propped against walls, hanging at awkward angles, perched atop piles of discarded glass. Some were fogged, others cracked. But all reflected the same impossible thing, movement where there was none. Elise and Gabriel stood still, but in every mirror, their doubles twitched, blinked too late, tilted their heads in opposing directions. In one mirror, Elise saw herself smile, a sharp, deliberate smile she hadn't made. In another, Gabriel's copy turned away entirely, pacing toward a darkness in the frame's corner. Elise whispered, "They're not trying to fool us anymore." "They don't have to," Gabriel replied. "We know what they are. That makes them braver." They moved deeper into the building. The back room door had been left ajar. The same one where the mirror had first called to Elise all those months ago. She remembered the sound. The low hum beneath the silence, the way her skin prickled, the faint pull behind her belly button as if something invisible had reached through the glass and tugged. Now, that room breathed. Not metaphorically. She heard it. Slow inhales, drawn through what sounded like teeth. Exhales that vibrated the floor. She opened the door, and there it was. Not one mirror. Hundreds, covering every inch of the room. Walls, ceiling, floor. A dome of glass that didn't reflect her or Gabriel at all. Instead, each pane showed a version of this very room, but with subtle differences. In one, Elise and Gabriel were alone. In another, they were surrounded by silent people, blank faces, gaping mouths. In yet another, they lay on the floor, unmoving, as their reflections stood over them, watching. "What is this?" Gabriel asked under his breath. Elise stepped forward. The mirrors didn't react, but the air grew heavier, thicker. Her ears popped. Blood throbbed in her throat. Behind her, she felt 1,000 versions of herself lean in. One mirror flickered suddenly, shifting from a reflection of the room to something else. A hallway. Familiar. Too familiar. It was the hallway from her childhood home. The peeling wallpaper, the uneven floorboards. Her old bedroom door at the end. The next mirror flickered. Gabriel's basement. The one his father had locked him in. Then another. The hospital waiting room where Elise had last seen her mother. Each mirror was a scar. Not metaphorical wounds, but places where pain had rooted itself deeply enough to become real. Memory given weight. And in this room, it was clear. The mirrors weren't doors. They were graves. "Gabriel," Elise said, her voice barely a whisper. "I think we've been buried." He turned to her, confused. "What do you mean?" She pointed at a mirror that showed both of them lying in hospital beds. Machines flatlined, visitors crying. "That's not a vision," she said. "It's a possibility. A place we never left. We thought we came back. But I don't think we ever made it out." Gabriel's face drained of color. "So this is... what? A coma? Purgatory?" "No," Elise said. "This is what happens when you become part of the mirror. It stops being a reflection. It starts being a memory loop. A maze made out of everything you tried to forget. They turned to leave. But the door was gone. Only mirrors remained. And one of them, a large, tall piece in the center of the far wall, shimmered. It didn't show any room. It showed them, but not present day. Younger, aged back years, laughing in a field somewhere green and quiet. No pain, no loss, no mirrors, just joy. It was beautiful, so beautiful it hurt. Gabriel stepped toward it. His hand lifted. Elise, what if this one is the way out? She knew what he was feeling. The pull, the ache. But she also knew better. She stepped between him and the glass. That's not an exit. It's a trap. How can you be sure? She pointed to the bottom edge of the frame, where a thin black crack had started to grow. It wants you to choose it. Because the moment you want something bad enough in here, it owns you. Gabriel's face twisted with frustration. Then what do we do? Elise turned slowly, taking in every mirror in the room. Some flickered. Some remained still. All of them whispered something. Then she said the words out loud, "We break the pattern." She took the flashlight from her pocket and smashed it into the nearest mirror. The room screamed, not noise. Emotion, panic, fury, loss. But it passed. The mirror cracked, then melted away into dust. Gabriel hesitated, then did the same. One by one, they destroyed the images, not to escape, to erase the hold these memories had. With each shatter, the air lightened. With each break, Elise felt more present, until only one mirror remained, the original, the tall one from the beginning, unbroken, unaffected. Elise walked to it. Her reflection waited. It didn't move, didn't speak, it simply stared. Then, softly, with no drama, it blinked, and whispered, "You forgot something." Elise frowned. "What?" The reflection leaned forward and smiled with sadness. "You." Then it stepped back, and behind it Elise saw something else, a door. A real one. Wood, brass handle. No tricks. She turned to Gabriel. "Are you ready?" He nodded. But as she reached for the handle, the reflection mouthed something she couldn't hear. It wasn't a threat, it was a warning. She opened the door anyway, and stepped through. The door didn't creak when it opened. It sighed, long and low, like the exhale of something ancient that had been waiting too long to speak. Elise stepped through, and Gabriel followed, both of them bracing for the jarring shift they'd come to expect. Shifting walls, echoing screams, the sudden drop into something wrong. But what greeted them on the other side wasn't horror. It was a bedroom, hers, from childhood. Everything was exactly the same. The lavender bedsheets. The dent in the dresser where she'd slammed it shut during a fight with her mother. The crook poster of the moon, torn at one corner. It was all here, not recreated, not staged. Remembered. Down to the faint smell of fabric softener and lemon. Gabriel's breath caught in his throat. "I don't like this." "I do," Elise said quietly. "That's what scares me. It wasn't just memory. It was comfort. Perfect comfort. That's what made it dangerous. Because comfort was the easiest place to get lost." She stepped further into the room. The window was closed. Rain tapped against the glass with slow, deliberate rhythm. There was no mirror on the wall. No reflection at all, just her. Just now. But the silence hummed beneath it all, a waiting thing, draped in nostalgia and cloaked in kindness. Gabriel opened the closet. Empty. Then looked under the bed. Nothing. The room was clean, untouched, safe. And that's when Elise saw it. A photo on the nightstand. Her, as a little girl. Sitting beside her mother, holding hands, laughing. It wasn't real. That moment never happened. They hadn't spoken that day. Her mother had been gone before dinner. But here it was, frozen forever. The version of life she had wanted. Her fingers shook as she picked up the frame. The back of it felt warm. Too warm. She turned it over. And gasped. It wasn't a photo. It was glass. Mirror glass. Beneath the image, distorted just enough to go unnoticed, her own reflection blinked out of sync. Elise dropped it. The frame hit the floor and shattered. The glass inside didn't crack. It bled. Dark. Oily fluid spilled across the hardwood like veins reaching for her feet. Gabriel grabbed her arm. We need to go. The bedroom door slammed shut behind them. The rain outside stopped mid-drip. The tap against the window froze. Time had paused, and the room began to shift. Not visibly, not loudly, but completely. The bedsheets decayed before their eyes, turning to mildew and ash. The dresser peeled apart like wet cardboard. The walls blackened, rotted. But what changed most was the sound. It came back, breathing, not human, wet and rattling, like lungs filled with water and rot. Then the whisper, low and familiar, "Elise, Elise, come home." It came from the hallway. Gabriel reached for the door handle. It was gone. The door had melted. No escape. The mirror world wasn't finished. It had played the final card, the desire to go back. Not just to escape pain, but to rewrite it. Elise turned slowly. The closet door creaked open. Behind it wasn't darkness. It was light, pale, soft, golden, and her mother's voice called from within. "Sweetheart, it's okay. You can rest now." Elise's eyes welled. It sounded so real, so gentle. Gabriel grabbed her hand, gripping hard. "That's not her." "I know, but part of you wants it to be." "I know." That was the trap. The thing's power had never been fear. It was longing. Desire for what never was. Elise took a step toward the closet. Gabriel tried to stop her, but she turned, eyes sharp. "I'm not going in." She grabbed the frame from the floor, the bleeding one, and held it high. The mirror surface inside writhed, pulling at the edges, forming faint shapes, her mother's smile, her own younger face. A doorway opened to somewhere warm and safe. She stared into it and whispered, "You don't own this anymore," then slammed it against the wall. The explosion of sound that followed wasn't physical. It was personal, a shriek of fractured memory, a wail of grief unaccepted. The room screamed with her, walls buckling, floor cracking, the ceiling rippling like a heartbeat. Light and shadow spun around her, clawing at her thoughts, throwing old moments into her mind like knives. Fights with her mother, nights alone, the empty bed on Christmas morning. But Elise didn't run. She didn't scream. She stood, and when the noise finally stopped, the room was gone. They stood in a white hallway. No mirrors, no furniture, no sound, just one door ahead. Wooden, closed. Elise and Gabriel approached together, and carved into the wood, deep and shaking, were the words, "Ram baro o omar bafor al u lokadi." Gabriel read it aloud, then glanced at her. "You ready?" Elise smiled faintly, not a brave smile, not a fake one, just real, as I'll ever be. She reached for the handle and opened the final door. The door swung open with a quiet click, not into darkness, but into something much worse, recognition. Elise stepped through first, and the instant her foot touched the black and white checkered floor, she froze. Gabriel followed, his breath catching in his throat as he saw what lay ahead. It was the mirror room, but not the one from the shop. Not a twisted version. Not a nightmare wrapped in metaphor or memory. This was the original, the one they thought had shattered, clean, polished, perfect. The massive floor to ceiling mirror stood directly ahead, untouched, untouched by time, untouched by what they'd done. It was exactly as it had been the first time they saw it. Silent, waiting, impossibly still. Except now, it was alive. The room pulsed faintly. Every few seconds, a soft vibration rippled through the tiles beneath their feet, like the whole structure was breathing through stone. Elise felt it in her bones, not through sound, but through pressure. Like the space itself was aware of her presence and adjusting for it. She approached the mirror cautiously. Gabriel stayed close behind, eyes locked on their reflections. And that's when they saw it. Their reflections weren't moving. They stood still, perfectly still, even as Elise and Gabriel stepped forward, shifted, turned their heads. The mirrored versions didn't blink, didn't twitch, didn't breathe, but they stared. God, did they stare. Then, in perfect synchronization, both reflections smiled. That same wide, unnatural grin Elise had seen before. A grin that held no warmth, only teeth. Gabriel whispered, "It's not just showing us, it's studying us." No, Elise said slowly. It's waiting. For what? For us to ask the question. Gabriel turned to her. What question? She swallowed and looked directly into her reflection's empty eyes. Which one of us is real? The second the words left her mouth, the mirror fractured, not with cracks, but with motion. Their reflections blinked, once, then stepped forward. Out. The surface of the mirror rippled like water, and the reflections crossed through without resistance. No sound. No shimmer. Just two versions of Elise and Gabriel, now standing in the room. And they looked right, down to the smallest detail. Elise felt Gabriel's hand twitch next to hers. One of the copies spoke. Her voice, same pitch, same cadence, but wrong. You've come so far just to be reminded you're still lost. The other Gabriel stepped forward. You chose to believe you escaped, but you never made a choice. The mirror made it for you. Elise clenched her jaw. What do you want? The mirrored Elise tilted her head, smiling. To finish what was started. There's only room for one version of you. A low hum filled the room then, not mechanical, but cellular. Like every atom in the space had started to vibrate. The walls blurred, the floor shimmered. Reality itself bent inward. You can't kill us, Gabriel said. His reflection smiled wider. We don't have to. The mirrors on the walls, ones they hadn't noticed until now, began to pulse, showing rapid flashes. Not of futures or fears or possibilities. Of doubt. Elise cheating on a test as a teen, then lying to her mother. Gabriel locking himself in the basement, not out of punishment, but to hide from the guilt of not saving someone years ago. One by one, every selfish moment, every mistake, every act of silence that harmed someone flashed before them in bursts of memory. You think you deserve freedom, the reflected Elise said, but what did you do to earn it? Elise felt the weight pressing again. Not from the room, but from inside her own mind. The old voices, the familiar shame, but something new stirred in her this time. She looked at her reflection and said, quietly, nothing. I don't deserve it. The mirrored version paused. Gabriel turned sharply to her, confused. Elise, she stepped forward. I don't deserve freedom. Not because I'm evil. Not because I'm broken. But because no one deserves it. We just try. Every day. And we fail. And we try again. The mirrored Gabriel hissed, stepping back. Cracks began to crawl across the tiles. You're trying to moralize a mistake, the copy spat. There is no redemption here. I'm not asking for redemption, Elise said. I'm choosing me. Even if it's a mess. Even if it's broken. And then she did something reckless. Something final. She grabbed the hand of her reflection. The air split. The mirror shrieked, not with sound, but with force, like reality itself was trying to eject the truth she had spoken. Elise gripped harder, pulling her reflection closer, until their foreheads touched. You can't trap someone who stops hiding. The reflection screamed, and shattered. The force of the blast knocked her back. Gabriel caught her just as his own copy disintegrated into a whirl of glass and static. All the mirrors, every last one, began to melt, not like wax, like ice, as if the warmth of honesty had finally touched the deepest, coldest part of the mirror's heart. The room began to fade, not break, not collapse, just fade. Gabriel turned to her, dazed. What's happening? I think we found the exit. Behind them, where the wall once stood, an open field spread out under a dusk, lit sky. Real grass, real wind. The kind of simple place that didn't need to prove itself. They walked through. The air felt different here. Not clean, not pure, but honest. Gabriel looked at her. Is it over? Elise didn't answer. Instead, she looked at the sky and whispered, we'll see. The field stretched wide beneath a bruised sky, deep orange bleeding into violet, as if the heavens themselves were still healing from something unspoken. Elise stepped barefoot onto the grass. It didn't bite, it didn't pull, it just was. For the first time in what felt like years. Though time had become so broken she wasn't sure anymore. Her feet touched earth that didn't shift beneath her. It felt wrong. in the way quiet feels wrong after months of screaming. The wind brushed her face like a forgotten friend, and yet even that breeze carried the faintest edge of something watching. Not hostile, not malicious, but attentive. Gabriel stood beside her, his eyes fixed on the horizon where the sun refused to set. It hovered just above the edge, stuck between day and night, casting long, impossible shadows behind them, shadows that didn't move when they did. Elise noticed it first. Their bodies turned. Their limbs shifted. But the shadows stayed where they were, stretched and patient, like they no longer belonged to them. "They're not ours," she said softly. Gabriel followed her gaze, frowning. "Then whose are they?" She didn't have to guess. The answer wasn't on the ground. It was in the sky. A shape hung just behind the clouds. Too large, too still to be a bird, too defined to be imagined. It had no clear edges, just suggestion. The impression of form. And wherever they moved, it subtly shifted its angle, like an eye too large to blink, hiding behind cloud and color. "We didn't leave it behind," Elise murmured. "We just crossed into its last threshold." Gabriel turned to her slowly. "You think this is the real world?" "No. I think this is what it looks like after. When the mirror doesn't need to reflect anymore. Because you've let it all in." He took a cautious step forward, but the field didn't end. It simply changed. Every few paces, the landscape subtly altered. A tree grew from nowhere, then vanished. A fence appeared, crumbling, only to flicker out of existence moments later. It was like walking through memory residue, fragments of a life that no longer belonged entirely to them. They came across a house, small, quiet, familiar in its angles and decay. It was Elise's childhood home again, but not how she remembered it. This time, it was clean, pristine, windows unbroken, lights on, the smell of dinner wafting faintly from inside. Elise froze. "No," Gabriel looked at her. "You sure?" "Yes, it's not trying to trick us anymore. It's giving us what we want. That's worse." The door creaked open. Inside, a figure stood in silhouette. Her mother, but younger, smiling, holding something in her hands. A mirror shard. "Elise," she called, her voice laced with warmth. "It's okay now. We can start again. You don't have to remember the bad parts. You can let go." Elise's knees buckled slightly. The voice was perfect. The invitation so tempting. But she took a breath and stepped back. "I need to remember," she whispered. "Because forgetting is how it began." The smile vanished. The figure dropped the shard. It shattered on the porch, and with it, so did the illusion. The house collapsed inward, not like wood breaking, but like paper folding into ash. A breathless wind sucked the space clean. The trees bent, the sky flinched, and the shape behind the clouds moved. Not forward, down. Elise and Gabriel didn't run. There was nowhere left to run. They stood at the center of the field as the sky cracked. Not open, but apart, like someone peeling back the layer of a photograph to show the negatives underneath. And from that tear, something stepped through. Not a monster, not a figure, a presence. It didn't take form. It assumed presence, filling their heads with overlapping thoughts, memory snippets, regrets looped on repeat. It stood before them without shape, but with absolute intent. It was the mirror, but not as an object, as awareness. "You called me," it said, though the voice wasn't external. It came from inside Elise's head, inside Gabriel's heartbeat. "You look too long." Elise swallowed hard. "Then finish it. End this." "You think this is a punishment?" the thing asked. "You think I was the threat? I was the echo. You were the source." Elise shook her head. "We tried to fix it." "No," it whispered. "You tried to bury it. And then you came back." Gabriel stepped forward, fists clenched. "Then what do we do?" The presence leaned in, though it didn't move. It just increased, like pressure behind the eyes. "You accept that I will always be with you. Not as an enemy, not as a ghost, but as a part of you." Elise felt her breath catch. A lifetime of fighting, running, hiding, and now it asked for surrender. But she understood. You can't kill the mirror. You carry it. You want me to live with the worst parts of myself, she said. I want you to see them. Always. Silence followed, and then the sky began to close. The shape faded. The presence softened. The field returned to stillness. They stood alone again, and this time their shadows moved with them. Elise turned to Gabriel, and for the first time since this nightmare began, she smiled. Not because it was over, but because they knew it never would be, and that was okay. They began walking, not toward an ending, but through the after. No mirrors, no tricks, just truth. And the long, quiet road of living with it. The road they walked wasn't paved. It wasn't a path so much as a direction, a gentle slope away from the field, away from the broken sky, away from the echo that had finally gone quiet. Their footsteps made no sound. The air wasn't heavy anymore. The pressure that had once curled around Elise's spine like a hand made of ice was gone. In its place was something harder to name. Not peace, not clarity, but truth. And it followed them like a second shadow, close, quiet, and always watching. They didn't talk much. Words felt like distractions now. What could be said that hadn't already been screamed, cried, whispered into mirrors that watched more than they showed? The questions were done. The answers too. All that remained was what had always been there, even before the mirrors themselves. The real versions, not perfect, not whole, but real. Eventually the trees appeared, thin and tall, stretching upward like they were trying to hold up the sky. Elise recognized them, though she didn't know how. It was the same forest they'd walked through when they first came to the mirror shop, only now the trees were still. No more voices in the leaves, no more shifting in the shadows, just wind. Real wind, honest and cold and indifferent. They passed a creek that hadn't been there before. Gabriel stopped to stare into the water, and Elise followed his gaze. The surface was glassy dark. For a moment, it looked like a mirror. They both stiffened, but then a fish broke the surface. The ripple spread, and they both exhaled. Not a trap, just water, just reflection. They moved on. The path, if it could be called that, ended at a small clearing. A bench sat beneath a dead tree. Not dramatic, not symbolic. Just an old, rotting bench left behind by someone who'd once needed to rest. Elise sat. Gabriel joined her. And for the first time, they felt the weight lift, not all at once, but slowly, like fog peeling away at the edge of morning. I don't think we escaped, Gabriel said, after a long silence. Elise nodded. No, I think we returned. To what? To what was always waiting, she said. Us. She turned and looked at him. We let it in. We gave it everything. Our fears, our pain, the parts of us we didn't want to see. And it twisted those things, mirrored them back to us until we didn't recognize ourselves. Gabriel's voice was low. And now, Elise reached into her coat pocket. She didn't know why. Maybe instinct. Maybe memory. But her fingers touched something cold, jagged. A shard. Glass. She pulled it out slowly. It was small. The size of a coin. From the first mirror, maybe. Or the last. It didn't matter. What mattered was what she saw in it. Just her. No smiles, no tricks, no delay, just Elise, flawed, weathered, human. She handed it to Gabriel. He looked and saw the same. They sat like that for a long time, passing the shard back and forth. Like a kind of ritual. Like naming a thing that had haunted them for too long. Naming it and accepting it. Eventually the shard dulled, not with time, but with choice. It no longer reflected. It just became glass, clear, empty. Nothing. Elise placed it on the bench between them. Neither of them said goodbye. They stood and walked away. Behind them, the bench remained. The tree stood quiet, and the glass, for the first time in its long, twisted history, reflected nothing at all. Because no one was looking, not anymore.